ask.
70, that's the number to call or text. We're asking you, when have you stood up against injustice? Or, if you haven't, when is the time? It's all ahead in the first hour of Boston Public Radio, 89.7 GBH, streaming live on youtube.com/GBH News.
Live from NPR News in Washington, I'm Corva Coleman. Trump administration officials say they're already rounding up more migrants accused of violent crimes. It's part of their effort to crack down on people without legal status in the United States. But NPR's Brian Mann reports so far, the number of arrests appears only slightly higher than under the Biden administration.
Trump officials say they've arrested roughly 400 migrants with criminal records. Speaking on Fox News, White House advisor Stephen Miller said initial immigration operations have already arrested and removed what he called some of the most vicious criminals in this country. But former acting director of U.S. Immigration and Customs John Sandwig told NPR enforcement actions carried out so far aren't a significant increase.
I think these operations, this initial surge, is business as usual.
NPR found migrant arrests varied over time during the Biden administration, but federal agents were already arresting more than 100 migrants per day with criminal convictions or charges pending before Trump took office. Brian Mann, NPR News, New York.
President Trump is being criticized for pardoning about 1,500 people this week. They were convicted or accused of participating in the January 6th attack on the U.S. Capitol. Trump claims attackers were innocent, but about 140 law enforcement officers were attacked that day, including some who were brutally assaulted. Former Capitol Hill police officer Harry Dunn testified about being assaulted. He says he'll still speak up.
They want you to be afraid. They want you to stop talking. That's their mission. And, I mean, yeah, we've already seen what they're capable of, what they're willing to do. So I don't want to be naive to think that they wouldn't do something or try to do something. But I'm not prepared to live in fear because that means they win.
The founder of the extremist group, the Oath Keepers, had his 18-year prison sentence commuted by President Trump. Stuart Rhodes went to Capitol Hill yesterday. He says he wants Trump to seek retribution on his behalf. President Trump says he is open to billionaire Elon Musk or Oracle chairman Larry Ellison purchasing TikTok. NPR's Bobby Allen reports the popular video-sharing app remains in legal limbo until it breaks away from its Chinese owner.
Neither Musk nor Ellison has come right out and announced any interest in TikTok, but Ellison stood next to Trump in the White House when he made this comment.
So what I'm thinking about saying to somebody is buy it and give half to the United States of America, half, and we'll give you the permit. And they'll have a great partner, the United States.
A federal law upheld by the Supreme Court mandates the video app's U.S. operations be sold away from China. Other self-described bidders include the content creator known as Mr. Beast. Any TikTok transaction would require approval from Beijing. Bobby Allen, NPR News.
On Wall Street, the Dow Jones Industrial Average is up more than 180 points. You're listening to NPR News from Washington.
Good morning. With the latest from the GBH Newsroom, I'm Henry Santoro. New England Patriot safety Cabral Peppers admitted in court today to possession of cocaine, which clears the charge through an agreement with prosecutors just ahead of his trial on domestic abuse allegations. The Globe reports that the 29-year-old Peppers admitted to the Quincy court that police did find cocaine on him after his arrest on the assault charges. The charge was continued without a finding, meaning that if Peppers completes a probationary period without reoffending, the drug charge will be dropped. According to court records, Peppers had pleaded not guilty to choking a woman multiple times and pushing her head against a wall before forcing her from his Braintree apartment in the middle of the night on October 5th. He's now free on $2,500 bail. Worcester's public school superintendent says the city will not coordinate with ICE should its agents come knocking. Mass Live reports that the school bus drivers in Worcester will not let students off the bus if there are immigration agents at the bus stops. Report says a memo sent to school staff and transportation officials follows a recent directive from President Donald Trump allowing federal immigration officials to make arrests at public schools. In sports, the Bruins host Ottawa at the Garden tonight. The Celtics play the Lakers in L.A., and they are into the semifinals at the Australian Open. In the forecast, sun clouds, low 30s today, light clouds and 18 degrees overnight. We're at 23 degrees in Boston right now. This is GBH News.
Support for NPR comes from NPR stations. Other contributors include Imaginable Futures, celebrating the hard work, commitment, and achievements of the 1 in 5 college students who are parents. More at imaginablefutures.com. This is NPR.
He's Jim Browdy. I am Marjorie Yegan. Welcome to Boston Public Radio 89.7 GBH. We are broadcasting live in Brighton from Studio 3 and streaming at youtube.com/GBH News. We're going to be back at the Boston Public Library tomorrow with live music from the great singer-songwriter Cat Wallace, plus retired federal judge Nancy Gertner and chefs Tracy Chang and Irene Lee ahead of the Lunar New Year. Plus, on Monday, we're going to be back here in Brighton. It won't be at the library, but we're going to talk with Michelle Wu, the mayor of Boston, for another edition of Ask the Mayor. Hello, Jim.
Hello, Marjorie. We're joined now on the line by Chuck Todd, Chuck's chief political analyst for NBC News and host of one of Marjorie's favorite podcasts, a little less favorite the last couple of days.
That's right.
The Chuck Toddcast. How you doing, Chuck?
I'm pretty good.
Yeah.
She didn't like the Biden stuff.
We could get.
I'm sorry. He really did mess things up here at the end. It's a bad stage.
Well, do we want to just go
Yeah,
there?
let's get
let's just
into
go
it.
there
Go
right
ahead.
now. Okay. I was going through the roof listening to the podcast. It wasn't so much the Biden thing, although I would dispute the entirely failed presidency. I think that was the word you used, especially since I'm watching.
Yeah, I'm pretty
LA.
harsh on this.
Yeah.
I really believe but anyway, go ahead. I'm sorry.
Well, I get the climate stuff when I'm watching LA burn. It's a little tough to listen to the guy that did more for climate than anybody that was ever president as a failed president. Well, we got this guy coming in that's a climate change denier. But the big thing to me, Chuck, was I thought there was a false equivalency between the Biden pardons, and you could say they were terrible. He shouldn't have done it. But pardons for people who tried to murder police officers, I guess it's not in the same weight to me, and that's how it sounded.
Well, I guess I disagree. Look, I agree with you on sort of the type of people that were pardoned, okay, in that, what Trump did, he pardoned basically a bunch of criminals. And these are people that are likely to commit more crimes, and we're going to see this. And but Joe Biden foamed the runway for these pardons. He made it where the pardons didn't look outrageous to average people who aren't tuning into every second of everything. And that's the thing. I think these pardons that he made are proof that he failed in his presidency. He had one job in his presidency, to turn the page, to help the country turn the page on Donald Trump. Not only did he not do that, he ended up behaving and doing the very thing that as president-elect he feared Donald Trump was going to do when he left office. And it is indefensible. And it is really, look, what Donald Trump is doing to the Republican Party in the country is horrendous. He's creating a kleptocracy. Okay? It is a full-on kleptocracy. The Republican Party is just a party that is, about Donald Trump and transacting with him, period. If you want to succeed in the Republican Party, you got to pay him a tax, whatever it is, right? So that has happened. When you see the leading Democrat, in this case Joe Biden, behave and do some of the tactics that they have been lecturing and fearing would happen, it really does make you throw up your hands and go, what was the point of that? And
Right.
and I would say the last minute aspects of these pardons for his siblings, and we can get into that. I mean, that smells to high heaven. I'm sorry, it did allow it all to look like, well, they're all abusing their pardon power. Thank you, Joe Biden.
So you fading on this, Marjorie, or no?
No,
Okay.
no, I'm not. Maybe I'm unaware. We had a sister on the air. Was she part of the kleptocracy? The 80-something sister of his. I mean,
By the way, let me just say, just so that I'm not like a passive observer here, I agree with Chuck about how egregiously concerning the Biden pardons are. I totally agree with you. I'm not sure Chuck disagrees that they don't. Maybe one paved the way for the other, but the breadth and outrageousness of the 1,500 or 1,600 pardons most of them, or many of them, by Trump, dwarf the significance of those of Biden. Do you disagree with that, Chuck Todd?
I don't know if they dwarf it because here's my concern.
Some of these people tried to kill cops, like Marjorie
said.
said.
Precedent. No. I understand that the individual people who receive pardons are much worse people that don't belong on the streets. Okay, that is it is, and I'm not saying Frank Biden is somebody that's about to unleash holy hell. Okay, on the streets of Wilmington.
Whoever he is.
They are senior
streets of Wilmington.
Senior citizens, after all.
Go ahead.
But what you've done is you've essentially given a permission slip that this is okay behavior, right? Once one party does, we know what's happening here, right? It's this horrible slippery slope. And this has been my greatest fear, that in order to defeat Trumpism, that Democrats start behaving like them in different ways. And it is just something I've feared, and his victory, and these are already little nuggets of potential proof that this is starting to happen, where you start to see it. I hear the rationalizations, but that's the problem when you're rationalizing one bad decision because, hey, it's not as bad as that guy's decision. We're all losing.
By the way, I would say they did it. The Democrats who voted for the
frustration here. But by the way, let me finish.
Yeah, sure.
I'm really pissed off at our founders. Our founders did a really good job on about 85 to 90% of the Constitution, right? But I asked, actually, I'm obsessed with this pardon. Why did they give? Here was a whole group of people who said we hate the monarchy, and yet they allowed one part of the monarchy to live in the American Constitution, the pardon power. And I asked this historian on I said, why did they do that? And she goes, there's probably somebody who wanted one. Yeah. Right, like back during the writing in 1789, there was somebody there. I need to get my record cleared, and I'm buddies with Washington, so let me do this. Because there's no other rationale for it. It should have been a pardon board. No one person, if you don't believe in a monarchy, no one person should have this. We could easily create a pardon board. I think there should be an ability, but a lot of states use this as pardon boards for a reason, because of the corruptibility of the pardon power, and we have just seen it. And look, we could sit here and say, oh, I heard some people say no pardons, after an election before inauguration. Okay, then it would just make the final day that you could issue pardons that much more. That isn't the issue. The issue is, do you really allow one person this kind of power? We thought shame would work. We have now learned shame doesn't work in American politics. It just doesn't work, okay? If it did, Donald Trump would never have been president.
By the way, another example I started to say about how the Democrats are trying to play the Republican game, at least in my mind, is the support, not a majority of Republicans, but 40-some in the House, 12 in the Senate, of this Laken-Riley immigration bill that I think has huge due process concerns, but they want to be like many Republicans.
But if
they want to look like they're getting
tough on immigrants. Here's my thing about this, Chuck. You may be very right. We never should have had pardons in the first place, and that was an error by the Founding Fathers. But I guess I think to people who are paying enough attention to put the two together, I think a lot of people would say to themselves, if I had this guy, Trump, threatening to go after my family members, go after people that were on the January 6th committee, go after people that with the full force of the Department of Justice, which is going to do what he wants. I think we know that if Pam Bondi becomes the Attorney General. Would I pardon my son? Would I pardon my kids? Yeah, I would, because this is a unique, we've never had this before. I mean, remember people complaining about when Bill Clinton years ago pardoned that guy, Mark.
You pardon your family members going 7 years back or whatever he did? Forget Hunter Biden for a second. I'm not sure you should, particularly after he pledged that he wouldn't do it. Your family members?
Because of the threats that Donald Trump is going to carry through on.
Why didn't he pardon Jack Smith? Why didn't he pardon the other witnesses before the judge?
Let me go the other way.
Yeah, go ahead.
Let me go the other way on this. If you believe in the pardon power, it should be done for those who don't have the means to defend themselves.
Correct.
I don't believe that's the case with the Biden family. In fact, they would be victims. And here's the thing. Do you remember the movie Minority Report? The premise of that movie?
No, I forget it.
The basic premise of the movie is that you start to arrest people before they commit
crime.
Oh,
that's right. The Tom Cruise thing.
Right.
Yeah, okay.
Oh, this person's going to commit a crime, so we're going to arrest them. And, it's the preemptive pardon issue to me is, I'm sorry, if Donald Trump is going to, if you fear he's going to abuse the power, let's see if he abuses the power. And if he abuses the power, then I guess I have, if you don't have faith in the public to punish that behavior, then that's a moment where you no longer have faith in the democracy itself.
By the way, what do you think?
And maybe that isn't the full way he thought this through, but that's the way this looks. What you're basically saying is you don't trust the system at all to eventually get to the righteous conclusion. And if that's the case, we're in bigger trouble than we thought.
Well, I don't think I am going to trust what the Department of Justice does under Pam Bondi. I can already see that there's going to be big problems there.
Yeah, but Joe Biden feeds that. I don't.
Yeah, but let me ask you, what do you think? And maybe I'm just ignorant about this. Obviously, Hunter Biden took advantage of his name to make a lot of money, and those shady deals and the tax evasion and stuff. But what about the siblings? What was his sister doing?
That's what I would like to know. I don't think. Look,
he's
I don't
not
think
arguing for them.
With a sister and one brother.
Uh-huh.
I don't understand why he gave them all pardons, but there is one sibling who is under the investigation who's got a business partner that's under investigation by the Justice Department. And you know whose Justice Department is investigating him? It was Biden's Justice Department.
Yeah.
So I look. I'm sorry. Joe Biden has lost all benefit of doubt with me. So I look at these pardons and I'm like, something smells here. One of these, why the siblings? If he really worried about them, why didn't he pardon the rest of his kids? Why didn't he pardon Joe Biden? Why didn't he pardon his grandchildren? He just went with 3 more siblings. Smells to high heaven. Sorry, it just smells.
We're talking to Chuck Todd. We're going to move on, Marjorie.
I thought she was a lovely woman, the sister, but
she
maybe
was, very
she's
nice.
a nefarious.
You don't even remember her name.
I don't think it has to do with her.
Oh, okay.
I don't think it has to do with Valerie. No, I think it has to do with the one brother.
Okay.
And you think the other siblings recover? Is that your deal?
Correct.
Okay.
Yep.
Can we go back to the pardons for a moment? For those who don't say, well, Biden did something horrible, so I'm not looking at the January 6th pardons quite as critically as I might. I think there's a significant chunk, I haven't seen polls yet, of the American people that are upset about this. But does this become sort of Ted Cruz gone to Cancun? Once time passes and many things happen, unless the Stuart Rhodes and Enrico Tarrio lead another revolution or another insurrection, does this become ancient history in a month or what?
See, I do think the recidivism likelihood where these guys end up committing more crimes, more violence, all of these things, bring it back, right? It won't completely go away. It will sort of hang around there. But I don't know how impactful it is going to be long term on this stuff. I mean, Trump's done unpopular things before, but here's what it does do. Like I'm also a believer. Apparently, you missed this part, Marjorie. I believe Trump's best day was Monday.
You believe what?
Okay?
Oh yeah, I did. You said that. I heard that. Heard that.
I didn't. Tell me why. Why?
Because I think that reality punches him in the face, right? He gets to do all these executive orders, 90% of which will do nothing, but they look good. They sound like press releases. They get people, he's doing something. Oh, he's trying to fulfill his promises, blah, blah, blah. These executive orders don't do anything. They're basically professional press releases with a signature on them, most of them. I'm not saying there aren't some that actually have teeth. There are, and all of this. But he's going to, he's dismissing all these people from government, and he's going to realize, how come we can't get anything done? Because you dismissed half your effing employees, you moron, that actually are experts in this field and all of this stuff. So I think his party's divided amongst itself. And what happens is when you run a kleptocracy, what happens is you have a whole bunch of people trying to get, basically on the inside, and they all fight each other. We're already seeing it. I mean, right, Scaramucci said, Vivek Ramaswamy is a -1 Scaramucci, right? Because he got fired before the 20th. Stephen Collinson, who's a reporter at CNN, he goes, man, I'm already, the Trump era, it feels like we've been doing this for 6 months. And he's not wrong, right? And what happened the first time? Trump wears out his welcome. People don't really like a lot of Trump, right? They'll take a little bit of Trump, but they don't like a lot of Trump. That's why his numbers are what they are, right? There are just people, and he never wins over new people liking him. He gets people to support him because they don't like the other side. right? That's been his MO. And when that's your MO, when things go south, you lose stuff quickly. I just, the Biden honeymoon was short. I expect this honeymoon to be just as short. Now, the real question I have is, does anybody know what they're doing on the Democratic Party in the side of the aisle? Because they really they're acting paralyzed, and Jeffries and Schumer clearly aren't meeting the moment. I think they are clearly struggling here to figure out how do they lead the loyal opposition. Neither one of them knows what to do here.
Well, how about the GOP, and how do they lead the loyal sycophancy? I mean, if I hear one more GOP leader, if I hear one more GOP leader say, I didn't see the video, it doesn't matter what it is, 6th. Of January 6th. Yeah. I mean, the fact that there are a small handful, the fact that they don't have the courage when their own damn lives are at risk to stand up and say something even timid is it, to me, a testament to the immense power and, in some ways, brilliance of Donald Trump. No,
it is. He has bullied everybody into submission in his party, and he's bullied a lot of media organizations into submission.
Yeah.
And we're watching it in real time right now, because you've got when every corporate CEO realizes, well, you can cut a deal with Trump if you do it on his terms. They've all decided to do this. And this is what happened to the country in the turn of the 20th century. You had all the robber barons with so much power and wealth, and the people in power were desperate for some of that wealth. And it was, there were two things about the first 25 years of America in the 20th century: extraordinarily corrupt, and a huge movement to push back on the robber barons and the corruptions. And we got direct election of senators to make sure we didn't have too many House of Lords, and we got women the right to vote, and we had a much more aggressive press corps starting to develop with the so-called muckrakers. And then you had people like Teddy Roosevelt, who put his finger in the wind and said, "Oh, I'm going to lead that movement." I mean, let's not pretend, Teddy was part of the in crowd until he wasn't, right? And for whatever reason, he became a hero to the progressive movement. But hey, you needed somebody like him, and at some point, there needs to be a true opponent to Trump that knows how to go after him, that maybe doesn't necessarily want his job, right? The beauty of what Roosevelt did is he went after the robber barons in a way and he did it arguably from the outside, right? He was more aggressive against them arguably after he left the White House. But I do think this is the moment we're living in, and I guess we're not going to expect any leadership inside of Washington. I think that's what we're discovering.
So you talked about some things the Democrats should not do and should do. So like what?
Well, I mean, I think they've got I do think their instinct of just focusing on cost of living issues. If this is what the election was about, and always looking, well, what did this do today to lower the price of eggs?
Yeah.
What did this do today to lower I do think that's what they got to constantly focus on and not get drawn in. I mean, I will say this. I am impressed that you don't get suckered into, don't chase every car.
Yeah.
Right. You don't get suckered in, on these immigration things. I know the party's really divided inside that in the House Democrats. They're just very divided on how to do this, because you literally have half that say, hey, this is un-American, and you have the other half that's saying, yeah, try winning in my congressional district right now. Right? Like, people are fed up with this, and we're in a moment like this. So they have to figure out a position on immigration that is, tough but fair, and hope that the public ultimately in polling wants it to be tough but fair. They don't want it to be unfair. Right? So I think they ought to be going harder at birthright citizenship. There's certain things where they ought to be protecting sort of the American way, and they ought to drown sort of wrap themselves in the flag and the American way on this. But they do need to be careful on the topics they pick, and they everything should be focused on what is it doing to improve the lives of everyday Americans.
What do you think of Reverend Buddy there, Chuck Todd?
I'm a big believer in religious freedom. I thought the right wing was too. I'm confused.
Okay.
Apparently, there's no freedom. I mean, you cannot. I mean, my goodness. I mean, how dare a religious leader? I mean, if our religious leaders aren't allowed to express a call for mercy, then who is? If we can't, But of course, this is the same movement that thinks the Pope is like some crazy woke leftist.
Hey, can you, can I get your take?
I'm really, it really is just awful, the treatment of a person. I mean, just think about, imagine what does the right do when the left criticizes a pastor?
What do
they do?
They go crazy.
Yeah.
They go crazy and talk about religious freedom.
So, Chuck, I've thought a lot about the evolution of Donald Trump on this. In the church service itself, other than I thought he was pretty respectful, and I'm sure inside he was ready to explode, but pretty respectful in there. Then he's walking back into the White House, and he says something like, I don't think it was a very good service. And then at 2 o'clock in the morning on Truth Social, the so-called bishop, and she's an anti-Trump, she's a hater, and then she's got to apologize. The only explanation for me was a Steve Bannon-esque person told him, you look like a weakling in how you handled this. So you got to be your usual out-of-control self. Was that it?
A little bit, but I'll tell you what Mrs. Todd would think. He wouldn't have reacted that way if it were a man.
Yeah, I think that's a very good point.
What would he have done if it were a man?
He doesn't like to get lectured by women.
Yeah.
Well, we said that. You said that yesterday,
Well,
Margaret,
it's mostly women when you think about the people who stood up to him. It has been women. But how do you think he would have reacted were it a man?
Not as vehement, not as I mean, I think he would have
not as nasty
complained about the service, but I don't think it would have been as nasty.
Yeah,
the words he picks to attack women are always more vicious, more nasty than the words he picks to it. I mean, just look at how he goes after Adam Schiff versus Liz Cheney.
Yeah.
I'm sorry. I mean, I think the toxic nature of the words he picks on Liz Cheney and I don't think I'm not condoning either one of them. But there's actually a difference in how he speaks about Benny Thompson versus Liz Cheney or any of the other January 6 people.
Well, our favorite part of the whole thing, and we're going to talk about this with listeners in a few minutes, was as the Reverend Buddy was speaking, Vance kept turning to his wife as if he wanted affirmation that this was outrageous from his wife.
And what does she do?
And the wife ignored him, not once, not twice, but 3 times, looking straight ahead and listening to every word the Reverend was saying. What do we make of that?
I guess Karen Pence has left quite a legacy.
It's exactly what I said to Marjorie this morning. Karen Pence redux.
Karen Pence, I don't think, I forget who wrote this, but
was it Woodward, I think?
We were all Karen Pence that day, right? She just like, I'm going to sit in my chair. I'm not getting up. I'm not getting up. God damn it, I'm not getting up. All right, my weak husband's getting up. I'm not getting up. And she didn't.
Oh, I thought you were talking about the original when
guts.
The night of the election. Didn't Woodward, I think it was Woodward, who wrote about how she turns to her husband and says, you got what you wanted or whatever it was.
And
leave me out of this.
Yes.
And Chuck, she didn't come to the inauguration, right? She didn't show up.
That's what he's talking about.
Yeah.
Nope. No. She and Michelle Obama are drinking Mai Tais in Honolulu. Okay?
Let's hope so.
I don't, as somebody said, I wish I could take credit for coming up with this, but as somebody said, that's the way the movie would end, right? You'd see him laying on the beach,
exactly right.
toasting and going, F that guy, right?
Hey, Chuck.
Looking good, Billy Ray. Feeling good, Lewis. Yeah.
See you next week, Chuck Todd. Thanks for your time.
Bye, guys.
See ya.
Thank you very much, Chuck. We have been speaking with Chuck Todd, Chief Political Analyst for NBC News and host of the Chuck Toddcast, which you should listen to yourself so you can hear what he was talking about with the pardons. It's available wherever you get your podcasts. Okay, after a quick break. Before giving that sermon we just talked about in front of President Trump on Tuesday, Bishop Marion Buddy asked herself why nobody was saying anything. Why was nobody standing up to this man? She has us thinking about small acts of resistance in our own lives and what that looks like in this new era. We're going to open the phone and text lines to talk about what you may have done to stand up to someone that deserved to be stood up to. After a quick break, you're listening to Boston Public Radio, 89.7 GBH, streaming at youtube.com/GBH News.
I'm Jared Bowen. Coming up on The Culture Show, the new documentary film Resistance, They Fought Back, tells the story of how, during World War II, Jews across Eastern Europe waged various campaigns of resistance against the Nazis. Plus, the profound photography of Cara Romero, whose large-scale photographs speak thunderously about the indigenous community and identity. Tune in for that and more on The Culture Show today at 2 on 89.7 GBH.
Our programs are made possible thanks to you. And Supermicro and NVIDIA, accelerating AI with a wide range of AI servers and the NVIDIA AI Enterprise software platform. Supermicro is committed to driving AI infrastructure breakthroughs with rack-scale innovations. And the Massachusetts Teachers Association, working together to ensure that all students have the resources they need to succeed. The MTA, 180 years of commitment to the public schools and colleges our communities deserve. massteacher.org.
Welcome back to Boston Public Radio. Mark Regan and Jim Browder. We're streaming at youtube.com/GBH News, live at the library tomorrow with Live Music Friday, Judge Gertner. And on Monday, back here in Brighton, the mayor, Mayor Wu, will zoom in for Ask the Mayor. You know, we touched on this briefly yesterday, but there was something really incredible about the sermon given Tuesday by Bishop Marianne Budde at the Washington National Cathedral. With Donald Trump and Vice President Vance mere feet away from her in the audience, she spoke honestly and directly to the new president about lessons from the Bible, about giving aid and comfort to immigrants, and about the fear that LGBTQ people have for what he's doing in the White House. Here's Budde defending her sermon yesterday on NPR's All Things Considered.
I decided to make an appeal to the president because I was hoping to, not only to him, but in speaking to him, to everyone who was listening to me speak to him, to help us remember that just to say how dangerous it is to speak of people in these broad categories.
You know, Bishop Budde's "Was anyone going to say anything?" line has us thinking about our own small acts of resistance. If you, for example, are critical of the anti-immigrant, anti-LGBTQ actions of Donald Trump, are you taking a look in the mirror and asking yourself, what can I say or do? Or let's take it down a notch. This actually is maybe more important about the injustices you see around you every day at work, on the subway, wherever it is. Maybe you've stood up. If that's the case, where did you find the courage? How did you do it? Why did you do it? And what advice do you have for the rest of us who find it more often than not pretty tough to do what Bishop Budde did yesterday in front of the most powerful person in the world? The number is 877-301-8970. Would you mind describing again, you touched on this with Chuck, the scene and that beautiful video in the New York Times story about Budde? That minute 45 video of the audience while Budde was speaking.
Yeah, I would say that the Trump bunch as a group, I mean, Trump wasn't showing that much emotion. We certainly wasn't happy with it. Melania looked horrified. The children and stepkids and whatever they were behind looked pretty horrified. And J.D. Vance was a little horrified, and he turns to his wife not once but twice, but I think it was three times, looking for sort of an affirmation of horror. And 3 times she totally ignores him. And one time he turns for a long time.
He speaks to her.
Yeah, she just keeps listening to every word that the bishop is saying and totally ignores him. So,
well, that was an act of, do you not see that as an act of resistance? At least it appears
to be. Yeah, well, I think it's hard, you know, when you're sitting there. She's the mother of 3 young children. Not that the Trump's people don't have grandchildren. They do. But, you know, what do you teach your children? And I think that's one of the issues. I mean, you know, that she was talking about mercy and... You know, she's a religious person, and the commandments, the Republicans want to hang the commandments everywhere. Well, you know, love thy neighbor as yourself is right up there. So I think that's what she was talking about, and that really annoyed them because, of course, shutting off refugee opportunities for people that helped us in Afghanistan, what does that say about us?
A lot. So early this morning...
That's what they've done, by the way. People that were ready to get on the planes, practically. Yes,
I know.
Thousands.
People who helped at great personal risk to this country and people in at war. You know, you and I were talking about this before the show this morning, and we were as critical off air as we have on air of the Republican cowards, frankly. Those who were critical of X, for example, of potential pardons, then all of a sudden I didn't see the video thing. And then I was saying, most of us don't have the courage I said to Marjorie, to stand up when we see small injustices in our own lives. And you made a wonderful point about the difference between those of us who are real people on the ground as opposed to these incredibly powerful people who are now meek and the opportunities they have.
And they're rich,
should they be
a lot of them.
Right, should they resist? So why don't you make that point and then we'll start taking
Well,
calls.
I said it's hard for people that are, working paycheck to paycheck to lead a jihad at the office against the boss when they know that's going to make them fired and probably very difficult to get a job again. But I would think most of these people are fairly well off. I mean, look at John Thune. Who he was asked about this by that reporter, I think it was a reporter
Manu from CNN.
Yeah, from CNN, about the pardons to all these people that were violence against cops, including some who actually tried to kill them. I mean, the guy that with a stun gun to the neck of that Michael Fanone sent him into cardiac arrest. John Thune says, "We're not looking backwards." And I thought, well, if we're not looking backwards, we couldn't prosecute anybody for any crime
because it all happened already.
The murder happened yesterday, but we're not looking backwards because we're moving forwards. I mean, what a ridiculous thing! And then people say that they're Susan Collins, who never fails to disappoint, said she was unfamiliar with the pardons. But she would disagree with them if they were for violent offenders.
No, but you didn't make your point. Your point that you were making me this morning is unlike real people, as you said, at a workplace, who, if they stand up, could put their jobs at risk, their families at risk. These guys, mostly guys, these guys and women have great opportunity. If it turns out they stood up to Trump and Trump said, I'm going to support a primary, and they lose, they'll be a lobbyist for $600,000 a year or whatever it is. So we want to know
the point is, if there were 3 or 4 or 5 Republicans who thought maybe we shouldn't appoint Hegseth, who not only is a horrible person, obviously, but doesn't know anything about the Pentagon or much about the world, maybe we're not going to vote for him. Or maybe we're not going to vote for RFK, who wanted to take away COVID vaccines when people were surviving COVID because they could get the vaccine. They could stop this. Maybe they should get together.
And even if there are
about
consequences for them, your point being, they'll have many of other opportunities. But we want to know, I'm mostly interested in your own lives when you've resisted, for lack of a more common expression, when you've stood up to somebody. I mean, a mother treating her kid like crap in a checkout line at Costco, or somebody at work, or whatever. Those are hard situations. And if you've done it, how'd you do it, and how'd you feel afterwards? And if you didn't do it, even though you knew it was the right thing to do, why? The number's 877-301-8970.
And you know what is interesting about this? These people are willing to do it like Thune in a very ridiculous and public way that makes them look pathetic and foolish. It's one thing if you're afraid to do anything and you're kind of don't do anything in your own quiet way, but they're doing it publicly. It's like Senator
What do you
Whitehouse.
mean? They're not standing up to them at all.
Exactly. They're looking like they're crawling on their hands and knees, as Sheldon Whitehouse put it, in front of the whole world. Thune is on TV admitting that he is just going to do whatever this guy wants him to do. That's what I think is unusual. Mitch McConnell stood up to him, said it was a
notice
terrible
Mitch
idea.
McConnell stood up to him when he was no longer the leader of the Republicans.
That's
in
right.
the Senate.
He's not going to be running again.
Let's go to Michi. You're in Concord. You're on Boston Public Radio. Thanks so much for calling. Hi.
Hi, I'm actually calling regarding my father. I wish I could be more like him.
Great.
He's long passed, but before the civil rights movement, he went with a bunch of his friends to a lunch counter with his African American friends as well, and refused to leave and was arrested. And he also refused to register for the draft during peacetime. He wrote a letter to the court explaining his views. He's a pacifist, and he didn't even want to serve in a pacifistic role. He didn't want to be a part of the mechanism at all. He knew that by doing that, he was going to go to federal prison, and he spent a year in prison for that. And then during the Reagan administration, he was, again, anti-war. He withheld $50 of his taxes and wrote a letter to Reagan saying that he was withholding this because he wasn't going to be a part of the war machine. But my mother, yeah, my mother, who didn't want to get in trouble with the IRS, wrote another check and stuck it in the mail unbeknownst to him.
That is fabulous. Hey, Michi, what do you think it was in your father that gave him the strength to do these things?
He had the courage of his conviction. That was the name of the paper. He was actually published. It's in a little treasury of American greats or something like that. And it was the way that he was raised. He was from the Midwest. He was raised with, he was a preacher, actually. And he believed in Jesus's teachings, not in the Old Testament. And that's really what drove him.
Michi, that is a beautiful start to this conversation.
Yeah, that was a great story.
Sounds
Thank
like a hell of a man.
for
Thanks
calling.
for sharing it. Now, her father is a man, but Nancy from Wickford, Rhode Island, says what you've said about 10,000 times. She texts. It seems that more women than men have can we say the balls? I think we can say that on the radio.
Sure.
The balls to stand up to Donald Trump. As we know, Fonnie Willis, Letitia James, Cassidy Hutchinson.
The young woman that testified for the January 6th committee, Stephanie Grisham, who also she used to be Trump's press secretary. She's contemplating leaving the country because she's afraid the long knives or short lives, as we're seeing now, may be out for her. Nancy Pelosi. I mean, she's a powerful person. But I'll never forget that picture of her standing up across the table and pointing her finger at Trump. And Trump is sitting there looking horrified. I'm kind of a coward. You're more courageous than I am.
Well, I don't know about that. I mean, it's really, it's easy.
I've done things with kids.
What?
Kids are easy. You see a kid getting treated badly, that's easy to step in.
Well,
and I also think for a woman,
have you done that, by the way?
I've done that.
You have?
But you know what part of it is?
No.
I figure most men are not going to beat up a woman. If I were a man, they might beat me up.
Well, I have to say, as an active principle, whenever I've decided to step in, I usually assess how big the other person is. And if they're on the smaller side, I'm generally willing to act in a resistance kind of mode.
If you see somebody doing something awful to a child in front of you, you
know what the only problem, this
is
isn't our topic of the day. We've had this discussion before. The only problem, I've encountered that a lot in checkout lines, is you worry that as soon as you've angered the person, the parent, that as soon as you're out of view, they're going to treat the kid even worse.
What you can often do, though, is say something to the kid.
Yeah, still.
And just so that they know that you think what their parents did.
In any case, I think it's better to speak out than not. Stephanie on the road, we're talking about small acts of resistance when we're complaining that they're not large enough acts of resistance on the federal level. Hi, Stephanie.
Hi.
Hi.
I know why I am like the way I am, and that is when I was like 7 or 8, I was at my grandparents' house, and my grandfather had on the Nuremberg trials. And I said to him, Grampy, why did the Germans do all those things? And he said, because they were told to do it. And I said, oh, because I thought at 7, you're supposed to do what you're told. And he said, well, I said, aren't you supposed to do? He said, no, you're supposed to figure out what's right and do the right thing. I said, oh, okay. and I kind of lived my life like that. But
how hard is that, though? I mean, Stephanie, I'm glad it's a wonderful lesson, and I'm glad you have lived your life that way. It's not always easy,
I can give you an example.
What's that?
Right. No, it isn't easy. I can get. Yeah.
Please.
Okay. I'm on a bus going south of New York City, and a bus had broken down, and they picked up all the people, and there was merging 2 buses into one, and there was a very middle-aged, overweight black woman, and she, was kind of groaning. She had worked hard all day, and not one man got up to give her his seat to her. And so I'm like, here, you can have my seat. And then I had 5 or 6 men offer it to me, and I said, no, that's okay. I'm young. I'm strong.
But
it's happened a lot of times like that. And the thing is, you're not always liked.
Yeah. Well, you have to take a pass on that. You did the right thing. That is a great call again, Stephanie. Thank you so much for making it. 877-301-8970. What'd you used to do when a man would not when you were pregnant? You told the story. You were on the TV.
Oh, yeah. This is my big revolutionary act. Yeah, if you're about 9 months pregnant, people wouldn't stand. It was usually men, by the way.
That.
Women would stand up for you. But I just walked up to this guy who was young, about 25 years old, and I had my belly and my big, huge belly, and probably my belly button about 2 inches from his face. That was a good one. Yeah, I don't know how brave that is, but that's what I did.
I think it's pretty good. Kate in Bridgewater, welcome to the show. Huh?
I was just saying hi to Kate.
Oh, hi, Kate.
Hi.
Hi.
So there are so many opportunities in everybody's day, from the minute you get up until the minute you go to sleep, to have these kinds of encounters. And for me, I've been a practicing Christian since my early 20s. And every time that there's something, like you mentioned about the Costco, I've been in Costco or the supermarket and witnessed the horrific treatment of a child.
Yeah.
I always just say a little prayer. I approach them a little after and make engagement with the child, like you said, Margie.
Yeah, that's what I do.
I see you. I see that you have a lot of creativity in your outfit. I think you're beautiful. Have a beautiful, you know what I mean? And the parent knows and is shamed. I don't know, but to me, that has helped the child in some regard to, negate some of that negativity.
Yeah.
And, also in the supermarket, again, an elderly person who doesn't have enough money, is missing, 78 cents one time, and her whole order wouldn't go through with her EBT card, her food stamps, and I just paid for it. I mean, it's just like 78 cents, it's just... Most people just kind of put their heads down, shamefaced, and the poor woman has to leave without her groceries. I mean, there's just so many ways that we can do that.
And don't you feel
day.
pretty good about yourself after you've done those things?
Well, it isn't the point. You have to practice
humility,
too.
I know, but it doesn't hurt. It's positive reinforcement for good behavior. Kate, another...
I think,
sorry.
Yeah, God, I think we are blessed. I think it's the reaping and the sowing. When you sow seeds of the kindness, that's going to come back. And I've had people do that to me. Like I said, in my early 20s, one time, just a quick story.
Sure.
I was working as a hairdresser. I've worked with the public a lot. And for some reason, somebody stole the tire out of my car, put my car up on a cinder block. But listen to what happened. When I went out to get in my car, I just wasn't really paying attention. It was in a crowded parking lot. I got in, I started the car, and of course it wouldn't go anywhere. I get out of the car, I look, and there's a tire missing. I turn back, and the entire salon was laughing. I go back into the salon, and a little old lady, must have been 80 years old, comes up to me, puts a $100 bill in my hand, and says, "I think that's shameful what they just did. Go get yourself a new tire." I will never forget that.
Well, obviously,
I will never forget that.
That's a great one. Neither will we.
That's a great one.
Hey, Kate, that's great. We have to take a break. Before we do, occasionally when you do stand up to people who deserve to be stood up to, and there's blowback, you retreat. Well, here's here's Bishop Buddy on NPR's All Things Considered on her reaction to the demand for an apology from Donald Trump.
I don't feel there is a need to apologize for a request for mercy. And I don't feel that there is a need to apologize to speak to the unity of this country that includes people that were not at all referenced in the unity that he spoke of the day before in his inaugural address.
I think I could stop being an agnostic right now, let me tell you. Good for her.
But before we go to the break, on the other side of the coin, here's Bob in Providence. Well, I've been beating up cops with flagpoles all week while waving a Trump flag because apparently that's okay now. Having some fun. Cheers, says Bob. We've been talking about those small acts of resistance in your life to the injustices you see every day. Time for a quick break. More of your calls and texts. Listening to Boston Public Radio, 89.7 GBH, streaming at youtube.com, GBH News /GBH News.
The world takes you outside your borders and connects you with the most important events happening all across this big blue marble.
We introduce you to memorable people whose stories will stay with you for a lifetime. I'm Marco Werman.
And I'm Carolyn Beeler, global news and inspiring voices that will keep you on top of the world.
Listen each weekday.
This afternoon at 3, here on GBH News 89.7.
Support for GBH comes from you. And Explo. From comedy to veterinary science, Explo's summer program helps middle schoolers find their spark. Day and overnight options at explo.org/summer. Priority deadline, February 15th. And Comcast Business, committed to providing connectivity for your business with network and cybersecurity solutions. Comcast Business, powering possibilities. Restrictions apply. To learn more, you can call or visit comcastbusiness.com.
Welcome back to Boston Public Radio. Marjorie Egan and Jim Browder. We're streaming at youtube.com/GBH News. We're live at the library tomorrow. We have Live Music Friday. Former federal judge Nancy Gertner will address many of the legal issues that have arisen during 3+ days of Trump. And on Monday, an Ask the Mayor on Zoom with Mayor Michelle Wu. Now, if you're just tuning in, we're talking about summoning the courage that Bishop Buddy was able to harness before preaching a sermon directly to Donald Trump and other people in great power in this country. You're also finding yourself asking the question she asked, is anyone going to say anything? And what does saying something look like in your own life? Standing up and speaking out against daily injustices, as we've heard these wonderful callers talk about in the last few minutes at 877-301-8970.
Here's Anna Medway. She says a small act of resistance was reported in the New York Times. It was everywhere, actually. I saw it. Is the MAGA granny, Miss Hempel, I think her first name is Pamela or something like that. She was arrested, did 2 months in prison, and she said she did not want her pardon because she said what she did was wrong. She's taken responsibility and verbalized remorse. And then Brian from Paxton says he used to work at a steakhouse in Boston, and the boss, the nasty boss as he called him, wanted him to fire people who were overweight because he was all about appearances. Brian said he refused to fire those people, and 4 months later he himself was fired.
Good for him. Leah in Cape Cod, you're next on Boston Public Radio. Welcome to the show. Hi.
Hello.
Hello. You're on.
When I was a high school history teacher, I had a boss that was a jerk. And I went to a cocktail party, and some people that I worked with came to me and said, blah, 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 and he's your boss. So I went in the next day, and I actually confronted him with not knowing that he was involved in something else, but he must have picked up on that and started harassing me. Well, I waited. I knew I was being harassed. I had a perfect record in school, all good reports until this incident. And so I waited. And the last day of school, I told him off. I went in his office, turned in my grade book, and told him off. He was a jerk. But come September, he went out of his way to harass me in little ways. And this went on for quite a while. I decided to take an early retirement, and to this day, I am so proud of myself for standing up to him. I cried a lot, but I'm always grateful that I did the right thing and told him that he was a jerk.
So are we.
Good for you.
That's really
Good for
great.
you.
Leah, thank you for sharing the story. We appreciate it.
Kim in Boston says she'd like to put out there that Bishop Marion Buddy's church has a discretionary fund that you can give to and contribute to, and she will use that to help those in need. Kim said she donated this morning.
Have you thought about the courage that had to be summoned in her?
She said she was really nervous.
I know. Would you not have been?
Yes. I mean,
and
she
by the
was
way, she was
within
staring.
feet of him.
Not only feet, I think at the time said 40 feet away, 7 feet elevated above him. But when she was talking about LGBTQ people being discriminated against and against immigrants, she was looking directly, calmly, and I thought terribly respectfully at the President of the United States. That's really something.
And what was she asking for? She was asking for mercy.
Mercy.
I'm not probably his strong suit.
And by the way, in the spirit of what he had said the day before in the inaugural address, when he was talking about when the bullet and the thing in Butler, Pennsylvania, and God decided to save him, or whatever the hell he said about God decided to do after the shooting. I thought it was a perfect context, beautifully said. And for those defenders of all things Donald Trump, no matter how outrageous it is, she could not have been more respectful. You don't have to like what she said. You don't have to agree with what she said, obviously, but she couldn't have said it in a more decent, calm, and respectful way. I know that doesn't fit the narrative that Trump is trying to establish, but she was brilliant.
Paul from Worcester says, when you join a cult, you have chosen to live on your knees over dying on your feet.
Well, I think that's exactly right. Let's go to Jonathan in Brighton. You're on Boston Public Radio. Hi, Jonathan. Welcome.
Good morning. Two things. Those of us who volunteered for the military, I think, sacrificed a lot because many of us didn't come home.
Yeah.
That's number one, unselfishly. Number two, my mom was in New York, and she was in politics, and she was in charge of buildings, and they wanted to put the World Trade Center, tear down Grand Central Station and put the World Trade Center there. So she told them, no, you have to put it downtown where it was eventually built. Had they put She lost her job. Mayor Lindsay fired her for that. And they wanted to tear down Radio City Music Hall, and she stopped that as well. So she was kind of an activist back then, but she lost her job, and you either like her or hate her, and then she went to Barnard to teach. But I guess I'm saying that she stood up to some big powers in New York, and we were very proud of her. But as kids, we really didn't know what she was doing because we were kids, and we didn't care. We're out playing or in the service. What do we know? But look.
Hey, Jonathan, one of the two of the people you're speaking to had a sibling who worked for John Lindsay. Didn't know that?
Yeah, I did.
Marjorie's sister worked for Mayor Lindsay a long time
his presidential campaign.
That didn't last long. Do you remember?
Didn't last long.
I thought he was going to be the next president of the United States.
She was fired too as well?
No, she wasn't fired.
Was not fired.
But she did work for John Lindsay and the guy that followed him.
Good. A-Beam was next? A-Beam, yeah.
A-Beam.
Jonathan, thank you for your call, and thanks for your mother, too. 877-301-8970.
Globe did a piece this morning talking about local religious leaders supporting Bishop Buddy in the sermon to
Does it
Trump.
include the new Cardinal of Boston?
It does not include the new Cardinal of Boston. We're waiting for him to say something about immigration. He's not said anything. Although I must say that the United States Conference of Bishops have condemned. Here's the headline: have condemned Trump on immigration orders and condemned his stoking fear and anxiety. And the Pope has called Trump's efforts to do mass deportations disgraceful. Yeah, you're right.
Joanne from the car, we have about a minute or so. It's yours. Welcome.
Welcome. Thank you, Jim. This is quick. I work in an early college program at a UMass campus, and we're supporting students in Brockton and New Bedford. And, you know, the anxiety level is really, really high. And we're just doing our best to try to give them the opportunities and to know that we're here for them.
Mm-hmm.
And, you know, we hope that they're able to stay in the country. So it's a small act, and it's what we can do ourselves. So I'm happy to do it every day.
I don't think it's such a small act at all. I know what you mean, but I think it's maybe a small act that has huge implications. Thanks for sharing that story. That's pretty good too, Joanne. Thank you.
Kate Groton thinks Bishop Buddy should be considered for the Profile and Courage Award.
Yeah,
I bet she would be, actually.
That was really an important moment, don't you think, early on, particularly when so many people were cowed, as we were discussing with Chuck Todd, people with far more power than Bishop Buddy has being cowed. And she rises to the occasion and then some.
Well, the richest, most powerful people in the world are being cowed.
That's a wonderful
point. That's what's so bizarre. You know, as I've said a million times, how much money do billionaires need? You know what I mean? Can't Mark Zuckerberg afford to hire a few more fact checkers and maybe not get every single government contract he needs? Can he afford that?
By the way, there was a story, I don't remember, I read it last night. He was thinking of standing up to Trump, and then he was distracted by Miss Sanchez. And he totally lost his concentration, so he's not sure what he wants to do next.
He's the new masculinity. He should be the one standing up to Trump. He's been practicing his martial arts there.
Yes.
He says that we've all been neutered in the corporate world, and I mean, but I guess he didn't.
He's
have
a fan of breasts.
Listening to Boston Public Radio with Jim Browdy and Marjorie Egan. Just ahead, more smart conversation about what's going on in our community. That's right after an NPR news break here on GBH News 89.7.
Funding for our programs comes from you and the Office of the Massachusetts State Treasurer. The Unclaimed Property Division is holding unclaimed funds from medical bills, uncashed paychecks, savings accounts, and more. To see if you have any unclaimed money, you can visit findmassmoney.gov. A three-part series from Ken Burns examines the rise of Nazism in Germany in the context of global anti-Semitism as well as immigration and eugenics in the United States. Watch The U.S. and the Holocaust tonight at 9 on GBH2.
You're listening to 89.7 WGBH, HD1 Boston, online at gbhnews.org. GBH News, what matters to you?
Where Business Association explained how the closing of a longtime bar prompted questions about Harvard Square's second largest landowner. That's all ahead of the second hour of Boston Public Radio, 89.7 GBH, and streaming live on youtube.com/GBH News.
Live from NPR News in Washington, I'm Windsor Johnston. In his first television interview since taking office, President Trump discussed a number of topics, including his executive orders, the future of the social media app TikTok, and former President Joe Biden. NPR's Franco Ordonez reports Trump also defended his decision to issue pardons for nearly all of the defendants charged in the January 6th insurrection.
In a wide-ranging interview with Fox's Sean Hannity, President Trump explained his thinking behind those pardons. He also cited his own legal battles and complained about the unfairness of President Biden's preemptive pardons of his family and allies.
I went through 4 years of hell. I spent millions of dollars in legal fees, and I won. But I did it the hard way. It's really hard to say that they shouldn't have to go through it also. It is very hard to say that.
Trump also criticized the Biden administration's response to hurricanes and repeated several misleading or false claims about foreign governments emptying their prisons into the U.S. Franco Ordonez, NPR News.
Senate Republicans are moving ahead today with President Trump's pick to lead the Pentagon. Former Army National Guard officer and former Fox News host Pete Hegseth is one of Trump's most controversial nominees. Republican Senator Lisa Murkowski, a key swing vote, says she has concerns about confirming Hegseth for the job.
There is a big vote this afternoon, or the initial vote on Hegseth this afternoon, and you will see my vote when I go to the chamber.
Do you have concerns about still?
Yes.
You do.
Hegseth is facing a number of allegations of sexual assault and misconduct. The most recent accuses him of being abusive toward his second wife. The European Union got more electricity from solar power than coal last year. NPR's Jeff Brady reports coal continues its long decline in the EU, even as the industry in the U.S. is hoping for a boost from the Trump administration.
Nuclear remains the top source of electricity in the EU, followed by wind, gas, and hydropower. But a review of the European Union's electricity generating fuels by the think tank Ember found for the first time solar generated more power than coal. Europe launched its Green Deal 5 years ago, aiming to zero out climate pollution by 2050. The U.S. has the same goal under the Paris Climate Agreement, though President Trump is withdrawing from that as he did during his first term. Renewable energy has also grown rapidly in the U.S. The research firm Rhodium Group says last year solar and wind power together generated slightly more electricity than coal in the U.S. Jeff Brady, NPR News.
This is NPR News in Washington.
Good afternoon. With the latest from the GBH Newsroom, I'm Henry Santoro. President Trump's pick to lead the Department of Health and Human Services, Robert F. Kennedy Jr., will appear before 2 Senate committees before the end of next month. The end of this month, that is. According to a spokesperson on Capitol Hill, the Senate Finance Committee hearing on the nomination will be on January 29th, and the Senate Health Committee is expected to hold a courtesy hearing the next day on the 30th. If confirmed, Massachusetts Department of Public Health Commissioner Robbie Goldstein tells GBH News Massachusetts is ready to work with the Department of Health and Human Services on issues where they align.
What I do think is important to say is that we in public health and we as a Department of Public Health are invested in data, in science, and in evidence. And we need to be careful that we don't lean into mis and disinformation, and that we always come back to what do the data tell us about this particular disease or this particular intervention.
Only the Senate Finance Committee will vote on whether to advance Kennedy's nomination to the full Senate. And it's official. The Boston Globe has purchased Boston Magazine. The Boston Business Journal reports that weeks after rumors first surfaced that Boston Globe Media was thinking of buying Boston Magazine, the two publishing companies said yesterday that the deal has been sealed. In the deal, the Globe will gain 30 employees, says all members of the team from Boston Magazine were extended offers to continue with their roles. Boston Magazine was owned by Metro Corp, which also publishes Philadelphia Magazine. 26 degrees. This is GBH News.
Support for NPR comes from NPR stations. Other contributors include Fisher Investments. Fisher is committed to helping clients stay on track to reach their financial goals and enjoy a comfortable retirement. FisherInvestments.com. Investing in securities involves the risk of loss.
He's Jim Browdy. I am Marjorie Egan. Welcome to hour number 2 of Boston Public Radio. We are broadcasting it from Studio 3 in Brighton and streaming at youtube.com/GBH News. We're going to be back at the Boston Public Library tomorrow with live music from singer-songwriter Cat Wallace, retired federal judge Nancy Gertner, chefs Tracy Chang and Irene Lee ahead of the Lunar New Year. Monday, we're going to be joined back here in Brighton with Michelle Wu, the mayor of Boston, for another edition of Ask the Mayor at noon. Hello again, Jim.
She'll be Zooming in, the mayor, on Monday, by the way. And speaking of Zoom, now on Zoom is former Suffolk County Sheriff, former Massachusetts Secretary of Public Safety, Andrea Cabral. She joins us weekly. Andrea, it's good to see you.
Good to see you both.
Well, we've been talking a lot about Trump's pardons of the January 6 rioters, some of whom tried to kill police officers. Since you were running the jail over there for quite some time, you're in law enforcement, you were a prosecutor, I wanted to ask you what you think.
Well, I mean, at this point, no one should be the least bit surprised that he issued the pardons. He does basically what he says he's going to do. He let people know. I know that the New York Times has a story by Luke Broadwater about the police, the Capitol Police themselves, and people who are sort of allies of the Capitol Police expressing their outrage, characterizing this as a complete betrayal, which of course it is. There is no question about that. But what I would also say is that there were a number of law enforcement agencies ranging from regular police departments to sheriff's offices and so forth that sort of stood in solidarity with Trump, knowing that he intended to pardon the very people that they investigate and arrest on a daily basis, not just for committing crimes, but specifically for committing crimes against members of law enforcement. And they still stood with him. So, yes, obviously there's outrage to be expressed. We express outrage literally minute by minute for everything that this administration has done in the past, is doing currently, and will continue to do in the future. But people should not forget that the one thing you can say about him is that he tells you exactly what it is that he's going to do. And if nearly half the country votes for him in spite of that, and then he goes ahead and does it, where does that leave? Where does that leave everyone?
Well, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Story when he used to do his campaign rallies in the first before the first administration, and during, he would always do that poem that ends with "You knew I was a snake when you picked me up," and everybody used to write about, the press used to write about that as him saying that about Democrats and people he calls these radical leftists. He was actually talking about himself. He was talking about himself and all of the voters. You knew he was a snake when you voted for him. So if he goes and proceeds to behave like a snake, that's what you voted for. Everything that happens in this country going forward is something that the people in this country voted for, because he didn't keep it a secret, and the people around him who want this all to happen, and it will happen, also didn't keep it a secret.
Are you surprised? I mean, you spoke to the support that he got from police unions, other police organizations when he was running, despite his pardon promises. I have to say, I'm surprised. Well, maybe I'm not surprised. I'm observing how few police unions which endorsed him have had the courage to stand up and condemn him for freeing people who attempted to kill their colleagues. You're smiling at me like I'm a... Go ahead.
No, what I would say to that is I'm not at all surprised. And that behavior follows directly the behavior of Republicans, some of whom are on videotape running from the very people he pardoned because they meant to hurt them. And they're asked about, what do you think about all of these pardons? And their immediate thing is, well, Biden pardoned some people that he shouldn't have pardoned. That's the response, the sort of deflection, the gaslighting. None of them have any courage to stand up to this. And it is, I don't really have words to describe what abject cowardice this represents, and what an absolute failure this is, and a violation of the oath that all of these people took, whether you're in law enforcement or in Congress, to protect and serve.
By the way, we should also say as an aside, only one day out from the pardons, one of the pardonees was already arrested on gun charges in Florida. And Stuart Rhodes, head of the Oath Keepers, back at Capitol Hill, not only touring Capitol Hill, he was sentenced to only 18 years in jail for sedition. He's meeting with members of the House of Representatives who are treating him like he's any other leader of an organization you might care about. And by the way, I forgot about this till you were just speaking. Trump at a press availability yesterday was asked if there was a place for leaders of groups like Oath Keepers and the Proud Boys. And he said, we'll see. We'll see. Yeah.
No, because they've learned the lessons, I think, really well. And the guy that you're talking about, his name is Daniel Charles Ball.
Yeah.
First of all, he was when he was noticed at the Capitol riot, the person who identified him was his current, then probation officer. He was already on probation
I didn't know
for
that.
committing crimes.
Right.
That's
Including strangling a woman. Didn't kill her, but came close.
Right. Exactly. A huge history of disruptive, disorderly, violent conduct, domestic violence, and then gets arrested a day after he's pardoned, essentially, because he's also got guns, which as a probationer, he should not have had at all. And these are additional federal charges. But Enrique Tarrio, who people will remember, was prosecuted for taking part in, I think, the riot and also the removal of the Black Lives Matter flag from the Black church, destroying that flag. I think he had some other charges. Has publicly post-pardon vowed vengeance.
Yes.
You know, on the people who went after him. So we know that the whole weaponization of the Justice Department is exactly what Trump intends to do, because, you know, first you accuse the other side of doing that which you intend to do, and then you actually do it. So using the Justice Department, using his pardon power, and then using the Justice Department to go after his enemies, people should expect that this is exactly what is going to happen.
Okay, well, I guess I am naive, because when I read these stories about how now here in Massachusetts, really all around the country, that political officials, law enforcement officials who won't comply with Trump's plan to arrest and deport undocumented immigrants should expect they're going to be prosecuted themselves by the Department of Justice. So you think they're going to do that too? Are they going to come in and arrest Mayor Wu if she doesn't go along with them?
I think it's pretty clear from the fact that there is a directive to the Justice Department to focus its attention on prosecuting state and local officials who, it's not a crime to not assist federal law enforcement in any respect. It can be a crime to impede federal law enforcement in the lawful, if they're carrying out lawful acts. But it's the injection of fear. When I say they've learned their lessons really, really well, this is another good example, because all they had to do was hold a performative hearing in Congress, and colleges and universities started backing off of their DEI stuff, right? All you have to do is show displeasure with it, and people who are already disinclined to do a particular thing will use that as an excuse to back off from it. And that's exactly what you're seeing. So now he's in office, and the first thing he does is he issues a directive eliminating all of the DEI initiatives throughout federal government. He's done this via an executive order. He's specifically issued an executive order saying he's going after colleges and universities, private colleges and universities, or even public ones that are not, there's no such thing as a federal university, going after them for their DEI initiatives. And this is all very personal. This is all personal. It's all part of the culture war. And what they've learned is that you will get an able assist if you merely suggest that there may be consequences to people for doing the right thing.
You know, can I get back to this this thing about what happens if local officials don't? Well, I'll tell you what the exact words in the executive order are: threaten to impede. And I've heard so many legal analysts since Trump signed this thing saying, well, technically they're not impeding. All that matters is what the Justice Department says. If the U.S. Attorney of the Justice Department says you're impeding by doing nothing more than not collaborating, they'll charge you if they want to charge you, and then maybe you'll be acquitted someday. But you got to go through this pain.
Maybe
and I'll
we
tell
should
you,
start calling people collaborators.
in light of the fact that when Mayor Wu on both our show and I think it was on Channel 5, I mentioned this yesterday, talked about this the Trust Act in Boston that didn't allow them to cooperate in certain ways with ICE and that sort of thing, and immediately Tom Homan, who's the border czar, the really tough-talking, macho border czar, who you can tell really gets off on the tough talk, says something. I had it in front of me. I can't, either she plays along,
get out of the way.
get the hell out of the way kind of
That
thing.
was it.
I don't think it's unreasonable to think they are going to set an example in San
Oh, no,
Francisco
I
or
think that's
Chicago
absolutely
or
what's gonna
Boston to show how tough they are. Yeah.
I think you're absolutely right. They are absolutely going to do it because the allegation is what makes the front page of the paper. When the thing falls apart, you have to search with a magnifying glass to find coverage of it.
Yeah.
And that's all they need. That's all they want.
Can we stay on the Justice Department? A point was made. It was either New York Times or Washington Post article. I'm sorry, but I don't have it in front of me. Saying that Trump has made it clear in many of his executive orders that the enforcement mechanism is the Justice Department.
Right.
And the underlying notion is it's no longer an independent Justice Department. It's essentially his private personal law firm that will carry out his things. I'm not
With
sure.
his two personal lawyers in positions
Who
high
literally
up
his
in the Justice
personal lawyers,
Department.
right? Not Pam Bondi, but number two
No,
and another person.
And defended him in the case in Mar-a-Lago with the classified documents and the
Bove and Blanche.
Yeah,
Right.
and the
So
overflow of the
could you
government.
explain to people what the history is of independence, Republican and Democratic independence between the chief executive, the president, and the Justice Department, how they're not his lawyers, so to speak, until now?
Right. That has never, ever happened in the entire history of the country. And both Democratic and Republican administrations have observed that wall between the executive branch and the Justice Department because part of the entire system of checks and balances relies on the Justice Department's independence and the non-interference with its business that comes from the executive branch. But again, people should be very clear about this. This has been sort of this slow, inexorable march toward this. When you get a Congress that has a Republican majority that will not do anything to stand up to the executive branch, you lose one of the checks and balances there. When you get a judiciary, particularly in the person of the SCOTUS, where you pack the lower branches with people that are going to issue like an Aileen Cannon that's going to issue a favorable rulings to you, but up to and including the SCOTUS, which has clearly suffers from some corruption issues and also has gone out of their way to make up out of whole cloth presidential immunity that has heretofore never existed for this particular president. Now you've got a judiciary that is no longer a system of checks and balances. And then you get into office again and you completely compromise the Justice Department to the point of appointing as a deputy attorney general one of your personal attorneys. And your other personal attorney will be in the Justice Department. And Pam Bondi, who has represented you in the past, will also be the attorney general.
Who's an election denier, by the way, we should say.
But this is a complete shutdown of the underpinnings of democracy. People, I really do hope people are paying attention to this. I had actually looked up, I just want to say, I should have done this at the outset to frame the conversation, by defining fascism, which American Heritage Dictionary says, a system of government marked by centralization of authority under a dictator, a capitalist economy subject to stringent governmental controls, violent suppression of the opposition, and typically a policy of belligerent nationalism and racism. Everything that's being done now, it's here. When people say, oh no, you got to stave off that, it's here. These are the people in this administration are the people who are ushering in all of the components of fascism. That's the system of government that we're heading toward.
If I can also just add one comment we've made before, when Andrea said this never happened before, this bringing the Justice Department in to essentially be my personal law firm, my being the president, and I know that a lot of listeners are saying, oh, come on, Joe Biden weaponized the Justice Department. I have two-word
Jack
response to
Kennedy
that.
had his
Hunter
brother.
Biden, I can say. I mean, they prosecuted his son, arguably the most important person, maybe along with Joe Biden. His, in quote, Justice Department prosecuted his son. His son was likely to go to jail in his sentencing. Now, obviously, he's been pardoned.
I thought you were going to say JFK made his brother the Attorney General.
Yeah.
That he probably shouldn't have done that.
No, but I'm saying, no, but the coin of the realm now is, as Andrea led with, I'm going to end the weaponization of the Justice Department that happened under Joe Biden. And I think the objective evidence, exactly, the objective evidence is that it was not weaponized at all. Can we
just stop for 1 second? When you stop and think about it, it's so crazy how fast everything has just deteriorated. To have United States senators and the whole, well, certainly at least half the country, even though citizens have said they didn't want the violent cops, violent rioters who beat up cops and attacked them with flagpoles and tasers and everything else. It's incredible that could happen. And these senators are just, president has the right to pardon anybody. I mean, it's like we're in an upside down world, and it took so little time for this guy to turn everything upside down, you know?
But I don't think it was quick. This has been happening for decades. Bush v. Gore was the first presidency decided by the SCOTUS. Does it surprise you that decades later, they would essentially decide that they could pardon or give immunity to a criminal president? This has been happening over time. The slippage of standards over time has led to this. It's just that when you hear historians talk about fascism, what they say is that it comes on slowly and then it seems to speed up.
Yeah.
But it is a process. The fall, look, when you watch a building being blown up, it comes down all at once. But the structural integrity of that building is compromised over years and years and years and years. So when it finally does come down, it can come down all at once and people get past it and accept that that building is no longer there and begin to live a life, whatever that life looks like, without that building in place.
Okay, and a lot of people are saying, I'd care about that, but as long as the price of eggs is going down. But you know what? It's gone up. So in the last few days,
coffee's going to go up.
It has actually gone up.
I read that this morning.
So Andrea, we never ask open-ended questions like this, but since we think about you a lot whenever we're talking about Trump, is there one thing that has totally put you, what's atop the list of things that have really put you over the edge since Monday at noon?
I really can't pinpoint one thing. I think the feeling that I've had for a while now is that, and what's probably saddens and disappoints me the most is the amount of faith that I have of necessity lost in a system in which I have deeply believed.
Marjorie too.
Where everything that I fought for in my entire career, the things that I always thought, if you just move the ball a little bit further down, if you just go through whatever it is that you're going through, the pushback that I got to being sheriff, the pushback that I've, gotten my whole life, you have to suck it up because you are moving the ball down the field for someone else. To be in 2025, having grown up in the 60s, to be here in 2025 and to watch the most comprehensive reassertion of white supremacy, white male supremacy, and wealth that I've ever seen in my entire life, to watch the retrenchment of that in order to stave off a change in the demographics and possibly a power shift in this country is the most devastating thing I think I could experience in my lifetime as an American. And I realize that I am personalizing it, but it is personal to me because I've been a public servant my whole life and believed in those standards.
Wow.
Well, we're not done. Okay. What do you? I mean, as a, I was going to say a lifelong Democrat, but that's how we met. You were
Democrats
you were
do?
Republican for 5 minutes once. We won't talk about that. Very brief. Look at her looking at me. I'm not going to tell the story. Don't worry. Yes, I will, but not right now. The only Democratic response I've seen so far, I think I mentioned this to Chuck Todd this morning, was 40 plus members of the House Democrats and 12 plus Democrats in the Senate signing on to an immigration bill that denies denies basic due process to people who have just been accused of, in some cases, minor crime, mandating
like shoplifting,
detention, right? Even just accused by somebody of that thing. Do you get a sense? I know it's early on, but as you said, most smart people knew something like this was coming. Do you get a sense of what the Democratic strategy is? Democrat strategy is for.
I don't know. I don't know that there is one, not a comprehensive one. And I will say that, as I talk about all of the things that the GOP is doing, I am equally appalled by the lack of a comprehensive, consistent, loud, and out there Democratic response to this. Even now, it absolutely baffles me. But if you look at the history of how fascist regimes have overtaken countries, they get help. They get help. They get help by acts of commission and acts of omission. Staying silent is sometimes one of the worst things you can possibly do. And as we know how the messaging works now. And maybe Democrats just feel like they're at a point now where there's so much disinformation and misinformation, they can't overcome it. Well, you know what? That people voted for you to at least try. And I don't see them trying.
I would agree with that, sadly. It is 3 days in, but I would agree with that. Andrea, as always, it is good to talk to you. Thanks for your perspective.
Thank you, Andrea.
See you soon.
We've been speaking with former Suffolk County Sheriff and former Massachusetts Secretary of Public Safety, Andrea Cabral, who joins us every week. Thank you, Andrea. Okay, after a quick break, we're going to get away from politics. Well, mostly, I guess. This isn't really a political story. It's about why Harvard Square has become so kind of blah and uninteresting and just
ain't what it used to be.
A lot of boarded up places over there. Huh?
Some, yeah.
We're going to talk with GBH's Philip Martin and Denise Gilson of the Harvard Square Business Association about what happened to Harvard Square. You're listening to Boston Public Radio 89.7 GBH. We're streaming at youtube.com/GBH News.
If you really want to know what's going on in this country...
Hi, my name is Isaac. I'm calling from Columbus, Ohio.
You have to get away from the extremes and listen to The Middle.
This is Samantha calling from St. Louis, Missouri.
On The Middle with Jeremy Hobson, I take your calls live on some of the biggest issues we face.
While I have hope for change, there are so many issues that I feel like are not being discussed on either side.
Join me each week on The Middle.
Tonight at 9 on GBH 89.7.
Our programs are made possible thanks to you. And Zimmons. Since 1909, fabrics, furnishings, reupholstery, and custom window treatments. Winter event now in progress. More information about Zimmons Design Services and their winter event at Zimmons.com or at their showroom in Lynn. And MIT Sloan Executive Education. Fueled by cutting-edge research and aided by the latest technology, open enrollment courses include over 90 in-person and online courses offered throughout the year. Executive.mit.edu.
Welcome back to Boston Public Radio. Marjorie Egan, Jim Browdy. We're live at the library tomorrow. We have live music. We have former federal judge Nancy Gertner. She's going to have a lot to talk about. Chefs Irene Lee and Tracy Chang. Tracy's from Pago and Central Square in Cambridge. And on Monday, the mayor, Mayor Wu, will zoom in for an Ask the Mayor, our January edition. So in late December, Whitney's of Harvard Square closed its doors for good after a rent dispute with landlord billionaire Gerald Chan, who owns much of Harvard Square. In fact, owns almost as much, well, not almost as much, but the only entity that owns more is Harvard itself. The bar was one of the oldest establishments left in the square. Its closing prompted questions about Chan's impact on the neighborhood. We're joined now in Studio 3 by Philip Martin, senior investigative reporter for GBH, whose recent investigation at GBH News looks at Chan's, I was going to say takeover, impact, let's say, on the square. I'm so glad you did this. I can't believe it. Also with Denise Gilson. She's the executive director for the Harvard Square Business Association. Denise, it's great to see you again. Philip, thanks for being here.
No, thank you, Jim. Thank you, Marjorie.
Yes, thank you both for coming in. Philip, let's start with you because you had a great piece and a great video or pictures of this bar that I've never been to in Harvard Square. So tell us about Whitney's and why it's significant.
Well, it's been there since 1953. You have a situation where a bar in Harvard Square that didn't seem to reflect, ostensibly at least, that Harvard Square, type of look. It was working class, but you also found Harvard students who came and went for the Harvard-Yale games. People would pack the place. There were events outside of the bar. It's a watering hole. It was, as we said in the piece, beloved. And it's been there for 71 years, and then poof, it's gone.
Explain it.
So,
I touched on it, but explain with a little more detail why it's gone.
Well, here I'll give you the skeleton. How's that?
Sure.
The skeletal aspects of this is that Whitney's has Dan McGuire, a working class kid from in his 40s, had been going into Harvard Square when it was the Harvard Square of the Pit, and so on and so forth. And he had been going to Whitney's since he could drink. And
probably before he could drink.
Before he could drink, right? He bought the place about 6 years ago from the fellow who had held on to it for years, and turned it into something where even more folks were coming into, more young people. And then, of course, COVID hit. He had a hard time. He worked with his landlord, Gerald Chan, and the group Mayhaw LLC, which is the property holder. And basically, they worked out a deal for rent. They worked out a deal for any number of things. But then he found he had trouble with the electrical system and decided to hold $44,000. This is what it came to in rent money, hold it in escrow. And then the Mayhaw said that wasn't the case, that this was simply withholding money, and essentially went after McGuire for the back rent. But McGuire says, no, this is something else that's happening altogether. This is not about rent. This is not about these issues. This is about the class. This is about the look and feel of my bar. Whitney's in a fast-changing Harvard Square that he said did not conform to the type of Harvard Square, this is his allegation, the type of Harvard Square that Gerald Chan envisaged.
So Denise, for those, I'm guessing people have heard, the Chan School of Public Health at Harvard, they heard his name, and he's quite the philanthropist, I should say, both at Worcester and Cambridge and that sort of thing. But give us a little background on Chan, when he first became involved in Harvard Square, how much he owns, that kind of thing.
Sure. So he bought his first property in 12. And he owns currently 14 properties. They amount to about $171 million. I think people respect what he's trying to do with the School of Public Health. They understand the enormous financial contribution that he made to the school and his desire to really participate in the curing of cancer.
However,
you buy a building, and there's a real interesting backstory to the theater. And I have to tell you that there isn't 2 days that go by when somebody's not calling me, texting me, bumping into me saying what's happening to the theater. So it's really important for us to understand that and its connection to Whitney's. So, there was this easement agreement between the theater in the building next door to the theater at 1430 Mass Ave, because if you guys ever used the restroom in the theater, you'll understand this whole story begins and ends with a leaky toilet. Seriously.
As most good stories do.
So what happened is you needed to use the restroom when you're at the theater. You go to this, this route that brings you to 1430 Mass Avenue. And after 35 years, that property owner said to the theater, look, I'm tired of your leaky toilets. We're not going to renew the easement agreement. You guys go install your own toilets. So AMC is looking at that and understanding they need to be ADA compliant, and there's a threshold, a financial threshold, and when you exceed that threshold in terms of dollars spent, you need to make the whole building ADA compliant. And with declining theater goers back in 12, AMC Theater says, we're done. They sell the building to Dick Friedman. He buys it in July of 12 for $6.5 million.
Dick Friedman owns the Charles Hotel,
right.
And big Democratic donor and that sort of
All
thing.
of that.
Yeah.
So Friedman buys the building for $6.5 million in 12, and 2 years later, Chan buys it from Friedman. Now, Friedman put a lock on the door, and he spent a fair amount of time with plans trying to figure out what to do with this space and how to install some toilets. And suddenly, Chan buys it for $17.5 million 2 years later.
Wow.
Considerable amount of money.
Yeah, nice
Good
profit.
Nice profit for Dick Friedman. And he has had it since then and hasn't done anything with it. And people say, look, you're picking on Whitney's for $44,000 in rent. But you have this building that you've had for 10 years that you have forfeited rent every single month, and you have no plan.
So if you walk by the theater, what are you seeing? Boarded up doors?
You see a lock on the door.
Yep.
You see some signage that says
onward and upward.
Onward and upward. Okay.
Onward and
Quite
upward.
ironic.
And you see that the building is in decline.
Can I tell you something? This is obviously subjective. I used to spend a lot of time in Harvard Square, and the Harvard Square Theater was a huge part of the vibrancy. You can talk about the Tasty, the Worst House, all these great things that were there, and there were not 400 banks and kind of thing. As soon as that thing was shuttered, I mean, I can't tell you, in my family, when are they going to reopen? We can't wait till they reopen. I know there was an effort in 2019 or something for a brief period of time. You reported on to open it. But it seems to me, and you're the expert because you're the head of the Harvard Square Business Association, that was the thing that really began the change. And the fact that it's been, and you, I think in your story, I'm sorry to ramble on, but this, you quote this guy White, who runs Mayhew, he runs the real estate company.
White.
Here's the quote. We want the square to be as vibrant as we can, and we're doing our best to make that happen. How exactly are they doing their best to make that happen when the centerpiece of their property is the theater that's now been shuttered for 10 years?
Well, that's just it. It's the theater is the epicenter of Harvard Square. And one of the things, there are two things. One of the things that Dan McGuire Whitney says is that this was a Harvard Square for everyone in Cambridge. Now it's essentially Harvard Square for tourists and for Harvard University students. He says he has nothing against Harvard University students, but that's what it's become. And how Dan White justifies this is he says, look, it's a mixed bag. On one hand, they have a property at Bow Street, which won a Cambridge Preservation Award. On the other hand, you're right. He's left, using Denise's word, fallow, the Harvard Square Theater, and uses the former upstairs on the Square restaurant as his office. That has Parsnips is what it became. It's now just an office where he sits overlooking Winthrop Park, literally looking out on the square. Anyway, the point here is that White says, look, there's nothing we can do with that property right now. We haven't come up with a viable plan. And if you look at the structure itself, it's unusable. This is what he says. And so my question to him was, look, if you find it's unusable, and if you find you don't have any plans for the square, how do you think it is impacting everyone around you in terms of businesses? The person across the street from him who runs the restaurant called Source, another Daniel Rowan, says that it is killing them. I've spoke to the people at Moto, a jewelry store on the corner there. They said having this theater there empty, fallow, seemingly abandoned,
with occasional rodents and some
with
stray
occasional
people in
rodents.
there.
That's right. That's been determined in the past.
Yeah.
That it's affecting everyone around them.
By the way, it doesn't look like a vacant building. It looks like an abandoned building.
It does look like an
citizen
abandoned
of Cambridge. Can you go back to before Denise bought into Harvard Square. Describe the Harvard Square of then and compare it to the Harvard Square of now. Not one building, the feel, the composition of the storefronts. And by the way, for those people who are saying I don't go to Harvard Square, every community has a thing like the Harvard Square Theater or an old bar. Everybody does. And when they disappear, in many cases, the life of that neighborhood disappears with it. So compare
Usually they're not vacant for 10 years.
Exactly.
Though. I mean,
describe the difference over that decade or so.
So if you think just about Church Street, but then the district as a whole.
Church Street where the
Church
theater
Street
is,
where
by
the
way.
theater is, yeah. A great example of what you're talking about is, the Border Cafe. And when the theater closed, almost immediately, the Border Cafe saw a decrease in the number of people.
Yeah.
And by the way, Fire and Ice. And across the street, Lizzie's Ice Cream. So there are fewer people. And when there are fewer people, the place just doesn't feel the same. And of course, the excitement of every Saturday night with people dressing up and coming to the
Rocky Horror Picture Show,
right? And, people would come every Saturday night. They would meet at the pit. They'd grab a slice at Pinocchio's. They'd, head over to the theater. They did their thing. When the theater closes, you lose that, and that component of the fabric of the square disappears.
Can you describe? You both mentioned the pit. People may not know what the pit is. Do you want to describe, Denise?
Sure.
Go ahead.
The pit is a section of the plaza out by Out of Town News that is lower than the rest of it. So it's called the pit, and it was a place where everybody could feel welcomed. Everybody, regardless.
So much life. I mean, it was
so much life.
Yeah.
So people would come and, you could be a grunge person, you could be a preppy person, you could be a rocker, you could be a biker. It didn't matter. Everybody was welcomed, and they hung out there. They smoked weed. Let's face it, they smoked weed. They got away with as much as they possibly could get away with. The kids in the entire area, right, in the entire region, when you get to be like 12 or 13 and your parents let you go to Harvard Square for the first time.
Yeah, big deal.
Where do you go? You go to the pit, right? And you hang out, and then you go to Newbury Comics. So there was all of this that doesn't exist today.
So here's an anonymous texter that's a perfect segue to what's the fix. Landlords who have vacant property for more than 3 years without evidence of an active plan should be subject to eminent domain takings. What is the council, what's the city of Cambridge thinking of doing to address this issue there, Philip?
The city council seems to go in and out in terms of what they say they're going to do and what they actually do. In 2017, you had a city council that said, we're going to take over this property by eminent domain. I was told later in an interview with Mark McGovern, well, this is a lot harder than we thought it was taking over property by eminent domain. I get that. But then after 2019, and then we get into post-COVID, you have the city council sending a letter to Chan's company, addressed to Chan, this is Mehal, saying that we'd like to schedule a meeting. No meeting took place. They were essentially, I understand, ignored in 2023 after sending this letter. We're now at 2025. And once again, the city council is threatening. But the last threat I heard was from Mark McGovern, who I interviewed in 2022, who said, if something doesn't happen here over the next 2 years, we're going to talk. Well, we're beyond that point, and Mark McGovern and others have essentially gone silent. They have sent threats, they have sent notes, but they haven't. There's been no sense of real action, real forward movement in terms of...
One of the things they're considering, which I never heard of before, is this vacancy fee, which apparently exists in San Francisco and a few other places.
Well, they're inquiring about the legality of such
if you're
a move.
if a property is vacant
right.
for more than X period of time, they can be charged a certain fee or a fine. Denise?
If you have $3 billion and the city fines you, how much are they going to fine you?
Yeah.
So what is his...
You're just going to pay
What's
it.
his game plan? Why does he want all this property if he's not going to do anything with at least some of it? You're making a face at me like I'm an idiot, or what's his... Is it just to make money? I mean, is that what it is?
That's a question for him. That's really a question for him. I can't answer that.
What do you think is the answer to the question?
Has anybody talked to him about this?
Yes, of course. Yes.
And what does he say?
So
he's
people
thinking about it.
Thinking about it. The last conversation I had with the representative from the company was in October, and they said, the numbers just don't work, and I get that the numbers don't work, particularly, considering how much money you paid, at the offset for the theater.
Right.
And so my comment was, well, why don't you just sell it, or take your losses and give it away?
Well, he did have he created one answer to that might be, and I'm not sure it is, but he bought a property in England called Hackfield Place. This is a manor from the 19th century that he turned into this incredibly, apparently beautiful 5-star hotel. But it took from 2001 or 2000 when he purchased the place to 2018 for this to be developed. So more than a decade.
Slow mover.
And so and some suggest that this might be the reason for the for the slow movement in Harvard Square that he's very meticulous. But other people, Daniel Rowan, for example, at Source, thinks it's a land grab, thinks it's all about grabbing land and letting it appreciate. You said something really important,
I did.
Jim. Yeah. Yeah, once in a while you do that. But you said something.
Just like a broken clock.
You said something really important about other properties. This is emulative of other situations around the state. And two examples that are worth mentioning is the Island Theater on Martha's Vineyard, which has been left fallow, again, using Denise's word, for a long time. And people are up in arms about it. And the other is the Sahara Club in the South End. Some people call it the Syria Club on Franklin Street, which has been vacant, I think, for about 30 years. And boarded up on Franklin Street in the South End in an area where housing could be developed or anything else for that matter.
You know what's so weird about this to me? I understand that you're entitled, well, arguably, unless the laws change, to do this. But you started by mentioning about his contributions to public health.
It seems
bringing
odd,
life to
that juxtaposition.
Exactly. Life.
Yeah.
One of the ways you have public health, in my estimation, is you have vibrancy in a community. You're both, all of us, nodding, and life in a community. And I have to say, I feel bad. I mean, as someone who's lived in Cambridge, I don't know, 30, whatever, I've lived here 35 years or something. I used to hang out in Harvard Square a lot. I spend much more time now in Union Square in Somerville, a mile from my house, Central Square, and I obviously live in Inman Square. And the thing I worry about, and hopefully you can disabuse me of this, I'm worried that there may be a point at which, Denise, it can't be brought back. I mean, that there's such, in the minds of so many people, Harvard Square is so changed for so long that even if the Chan thing is rectified and other vacant storefronts are filled, that the time has passed. Is that, I know it's hard for you to...
No, I refuse.
Go ahead,
I refuse to believe that, because here's the deal. You mentioned at the beginning there were 400 banks or something. The reality is there are about 9.
That's a lot.
We're closing banks.
Nobody goes to a bank anyway,
right,
by the way.
We're closing banks and we're opening bookstores. So Lovestruck Bookstore
we
just
talked
opened.
about that
talked
with
about
Meredith
and
Goldstein.
what about
Well, say what
out-of-town-
that is. That's great, by the way. It's a romance novel.
It's a-
bookstore,
yes,
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's great. I know for a long time there was a chain link fence around Out of Town News right in the center there of the
Still
city.
is.
Yeah, so that's a big problem too, isn't it?
So it's been a challenge, but the good news is there's a restoration project that's going on that we, the Business Association, initiated, by the way, in January of 11.
Wow.
Think about that, right? And but we're getting there, and the city will have it complete in 2026.
Restored into what?
Restored. So what will happen is it's 600 square feet, not much bigger than Whitney's, right? It's going to be divided in two. On one side of it will be the Office for Tourism. We'll have a little welcome center. So 300 square feet will be for the welcome center, and the other part will be something called Culture House, which is like a group out of Union Square that's going to make it a third. But when you think about that, it's 300 square feet. You put a couple of chairs and a table, you're going to get 3 people in there, and they'll do their thing, right? But that's fine. And then the outside, which is not ADA compliant, another ADA issue. The whole plaza will be restored. So the project has taken a long time. Notre Dame has come and gone. We've restored that in 5 years, right? In 5 years, but we will have the restoration of the kiosk and the complete restoration of the plaza complete by 2026.
One of the things people talked about in this election that frustrates people, they looked at democratically run cities and states and talked about that in places like Boston or Cambridge or any place around here, it is so difficult to do anything that it takes forever, and how frustrating that is to people that we're so slow. We want to make sure every T is crossed and all that, and I get it, but when it means that things languish like this, who are we really serving?
That's a really good point. And, for us, you're going to have a class at Harvard that graduates in May who has never seen the kiosk without the chain link fence, right? Now, the kiosk is a funny little structure that went in 1927. It's on the National Historic Register and has been since 1978. So the funny thing about that is the only thing you can do to that building is restore it. It's 600 square feet.
But it's right in the middle of all the traffic
that
goes around.
I want to clarify something here,
What?
at least from, I think, your reporting or maybe additional stuff that I've read. In terms of like the theater, for example, the plan that they put forward, which was unorthodox for Harvard Square, the Historical Commission, which can be tough, ultimately bought into, from what I understand, which is a huge approval in a reasonable period of time, and then he just dropped the plan. You can't blame this on, I'm speaking to you in this case, Marjorie, you can't blame it on regulation or, commissions that stand in the way of things. They worked with Chan's people, and it was going to happen, and then Chan's people just backed
this
off.
whole litany of how long he's been talking to people about what's going to happen.
Yeah, but
some of them are politicians.
No, I'm talking about, elected officials you're talking about.
Yeah.
Well, the council does, as a former city councilor for, as
you
know,
were the
one
tortoise, they
ill-fated.
called you.
I was the tortoise. That was
there.
my name. Jim the Tortoise Browdy was my nickname. No, I'm not defending them because and I'm a little disappointed. Mark McGovern's a very decent guy. The fact he isn't calling you back is really shameful, frankly.
Yeah, I think the other thing is that COVID was a real factor. The pandemic, without question, but it's not the reason.
COVID didn't happen in 2011 when the kiosk was an issue.
That's right.
You know that?
Right. I was going to say COVID is a factor, but it's not the reason. And I think COVID is being used as the reason. But to Mayhall's credit,
this is the property manager.
Yeah, the property manager. They also mentioned they've used the term unusable when they talk about the Harvard Square Theater, and so they have to figure out how to basically restructure this structure. But the question is, we haven't heard anything. The public is being left in the dark. There's reticence when it comes to talking about something that affects everyone.
Right.
And as we said at the very beginning of this impacts everyone in Harvard Square. One thing Denise pointed out in our interview is that 1,000 people less per day are on Church Street and in the area as a result of the theater's closing.
I'm one of those 1,000.
That's right. But the source suggests the people at the restaurant across the street, which have commissioned their own reports, suggest it's about 2,000 or more people that are absent from that.
We have about
from
15
Harvard Square.
seconds. You wanted to say something, Denise? Did you?
Yes.
Quickly.
So, their idea that they can't come up with a plan. You've had a decade. And in 2019, you were right, Jim, the Business Association was on board with that plan. The city, it was edgy, it was different. We had a demonstration. We saw how the ceramic tile was going to look at night. And then that was in July of 19. And then we never heard another
Not a
word.
peep.
Silence.
In any case, great reporting, and
Thank
stay
you.
at it, Denise. Harvard Square matters to a lot of us. I know it matters a lot to you, and stay on it. It's great to see you both.
Thank
Thanks
you.
so much.
Thank you very much. Denise Neese used to take care of my kids as a
Is that
part-time
true?
nanny.
Oh, that's
It's so
great.
wild. Lori, she's wonderful. Please tell her I said so.
For sure I will.
We've been speaking with GBH Senior Investigative Reporter Philip
By the way,
Martin.
we're going to invite Gerald Chan on. I don't. My guess is based on history, he will not join us, but we'd love to speak to Mr.
Absolutely.
Chan. We'll invite him. Go ahead.
And Denise Gilson from the Harvard Square Business Association. You can read Philip's piece about this barroom, this longtime barroom,
Great.
Whitney's, at gbhnews.org. Thank you both.
Thanks, you too. Bye.
Coming up after a quick break, it's our new segment, Two More Things, where we cover some news we couldn't get elsewhere in the show. And if we don't take any breaths, we just might have the time to say everything we want to before time is up. You're listening to Boston Public Radio, 89.7 GBH, streaming at youtube.com/GBH News.
It's been more than a month since rebel forces drove Syria's regime from power, but continued fighting from rival factions threatens the country's fragile stability.
We don't have a government.
The View from Syria's front lines on All Things Considered from NPR News.
Today at 4, here on GBH News 89.7.
Support for our programs comes from you. And Supermicro and NVIDIA, accelerating AI with a wide range of AI servers and the NVIDIA AI Enterprise software platform. Supermicro is committed to driving AI infrastructure breakthroughs with rack-scale innovations. And Celebrity Series of Boston, presenting Counterpoint, a collaboration between pianist Conrad Tao and tap dancer Caleb Teicher, live at Boston Arts Academy on February 7th and 8th. Tickets at celebrityseries.org.
Welcome back to Boston Public Radio. It's time for our relatively new segment, Two More Things. What's your one more thing, Marjorie?
Well, my one more thing is, we've all been watching the fires devour whole sections of California. Los Angeles are still burning out there. President Trump went on the Hannity show the other night, and he said that he threatened to withhold federal aid from California with this devastating fire. And then he lied and attacked Governor Newsom out there and California's leaders, saying that they're handling the water the wrong way. And if they don't handle the water the right way, which again is a lie about what this is about, he's not going to send them funding, which I think is just, it's beyond belief. And he also says that FEMA is getting in the way, and that what should happen is that states should handle their own problems along these regards, like hurricanes and fires and floods, which is going to be very difficult if you are a poor state. So that's pretty scary.
One of the most important functions, you would argue, of the federal government, wouldn't you?
Pretty big one.
Okay, so let's come back to a state. Yesterday, the governor files a $62 billion budget. I know we're not going to delve into all the details. We'll talk about some as time goes along. The legislature will consider theirs. They will not meet the deadline, will be the last budget in the country to pass, but that's not the issue. In the budget, there are additional financial commitments, a lot of things that matter. I'm sure the legislature will like them too. And the reason we can afford them as a state is because they raise taxes. Now, when I say they, I don't mean the people we elected to lead us, not tax-phobic legislators. I mean the people themselves. The millionaire's tax was passed on the ballot by the voters of Massachusetts. And while we talk all the time, Marjorie, about standing up to Trump in D.C., how about standing up to these anti-tax myths? The truth is, back home, public needs that people care about cost money. In the governor's budget, thanks to the publicly passed millionaire's tax, $275 million more for daycare grants, $225 million more to schools, $500 million more, that's 4 times last year's subsidy, to the T. And again, this is all not because elected officials had the courage to belly up to the bar on the difficult tax front, but because of the people of Massachusetts understood that an equitable tax that funds transportation and education is in the public interest. So we hope that legislators follow the lead of their constituents. Good for the people.
And I just want to say that the people in California have repeatedly said the scale and severity of these fires are not about empty reservoirs. It's about climate change. Trump,
well,
of course,
doesn't exist, as we know,
is a denier of climate change. So anyway, that's that.
That's that.
Okay, coming up after the 1 o'clock news, we're going to talk to MIT economist Jon Gruber. He's going to talk about the future of Obamacare, Medicaid, and some other programs under the new Trump administration.
GBH brings you coverage on a wide range of information so you can stay informed and engaged in our local community. We depend on listener contributions to keep this quality reporting going. Support your listening by pitching in at gbhnews.org.
Support for GBH comes from you and the University of Massachusetts Amherst Mount Ida campus in Newton, connecting students and employers in Greater Boston and offering on-campus graduate and pre-college programs. Learn more at umass.edu/Mount Ida campus. And Comcast, offering Xfinity Mobile, featuring data options that include streaming, browsing, and texting. More information is available at xfinity.com/mobile.
You're listening to 89.7 WGBH, HD1 Boston, online at gbhnews.org. GBH News, what matters to you?
I'm Jim Browdy, head of Hour 3 of Boston Public Radio, live from GBH and live streaming to youtube.com/GBH News. We'll start the 1 o'clock hour with John.
Mighty A-hole day on Boston Public Radio. An office manager with a gluten allergy refuses to buy Girl Scout cookies from a co-worker's daughter. Should they just buy the cookies anyway to support a good cause, or has in-office panhandling gone too far? You can call or text next on the 3rd hour of Boston Public Radio, 89.7 GBH, streaming on youtube.com/GBH News.
Live from NPR News in Washington, I'm Windsor Johnston. The Trump administration says it's rounding up more migrants accused of violent crimes. The move is part of a new effort to crack down on illegal immigration. But NPR's Brian Mann reports so far the number of arrests appears only slightly higher than under the Biden administration.
Trump officials say they've arrested roughly 400 migrants with criminal records. Speaking on Fox News, White House advisor Stephen Miller said initial immigration operations have already arrested and removed what he called some of the most vicious criminals in this country. But former acting director of U.S. Immigration and Customs John Sandwig told NPR enforcement actions carried out so far aren't a significant increase.
I think these operations, this initial surge, is business as usual.
NPR found migrant arrests varied over time during the Biden administration, but federal agents were already arresting more than 100 migrants per day with criminal convictions or charges pending before Trump took office. Brian Mann, NPR News, New York.
President Trump is making his first major appearance at an international event since taking office. During a virtual address to the World Economic Forum in Davos, Switzerland, Trump called on nations to invest in the United States, promising low tax rates and a more lenient regulatory process.
If you don't make your product in America, which is your prerogative, then very simply you will have to pay a tariff, differing amounts, but a tariff which will direct hundreds of billions of dollars and even trillions of dollars into our treasury to strengthen our economy and pay down debt.
Trump accused European regulators of being too tough on U.S. tech companies, oil producers, and big banks. A 6-week-long ceasefire between Hamas and Israel is mostly holding in the Gaza Strip since it began on Sunday. NPR's Aya Batrawi reports the agreement has paused more than 15 months of war and intense Israeli airstrikes in Gaza.
The UN humanitarian relief agency known as OCHA says more food entered Gaza in the first 3 days of the ceasefire than the entire month of October. The surge in aid comes after people in Gaza struggled to find food throughout most of the war. Thousands of children are suffering from acute malnutrition. The latest UN figures also show that 35,000 children are estimated to have had one or both parents killed in Gaza over the past year of war, and a further 17,000 children are unaccompanied after being separated from their families due to hostilities. Additionally, the UN says at least 20% of people in Gaza now have permanent disabilities, with thousands of children having lost one or both legs in the bombardment. Aya Batrawi, NPR News.
Stocks are trading mixed on Wall Street at this hour. The Dow was up 346 points. This is NPR News in Washington.
Good afternoon. With the latest from the GBH Newsroom, I'm Henry Santoro. People in Massachusetts wagered just over $7 billion on sports last year. That's according to a new report from the Massachusetts Gaming Commission. GBH's Tori Bedford has more takeaways from the full list calendar year since sports betting was legalized.
These wagers brought the state more than $130 million in tax revenue last year, almost all bet online through companies like DraftKings. Jonathan Cohen is an historian and author who writes about gambling. He says officials should question whether that tax revenue is worth the potential harm for consumers.
When you read a report like this, you wouldn't know where the money came from. It's just like presenting that as money that basically appeared out of thin air, whereas in fact, that money, of course, only comes from people in Massachusetts who are losing money gambling.
Massachusetts Gaming Commission Chair Jordan Maynard says sports betting was already happening illegally, and it's safer now.
The fact that we're able to bring it above ground has been important to the state.
350,000 people bet online on last year's Super Bowl. Tori Bedford, GBH News, 89.7.
If President Donald Trump follows through with his 25% tariff on products coming from Canada starting next weekend, electricity costs in Massachusetts could increase by as much as $200 million a year. That's what Massachusetts Governor Maura Healey told business leaders from the Associated Industries of Massachusetts this morning. Governor says she's very concerned about the president's idea to impose tariffs on China and new tariffs on products coming from Canada and from Mexico. 27 degrees, this is GBH News.
Support for NPR comes from NPR stations. Other contributors include Made in Cookware. Made in Cookware is crafted by chefs for chefs and designed for restaurants and home kitchens around the world. Their cookware can be found at madeincookware.com. This is NPR.
He is Jim Browdy. I am Marjorie Yeagan. Welcome to hour number 3 of Boston Public Radio, live from the GBH Studio 3 in Brighton, streaming at youtube.com/GBH News. We're going to be back at the Boston Public Library tomorrow. Live Music Friday with singer-songwriter Cat Wallace. Retired federal judge Nancy Gertner will join us. Chefs Tracy Chang and Irene Liam. This is going to be really fun ahead of the Lunar New Year. And then on Monday, just to give you some advance word here, we're going to have Michelle Wu, the mayor of Boston, zooming in at noon for another edition of Ask the Mayor. Hello again, Jim.
Hey there, Marjorie. So we're joined now on Zoom by Jon Gruber. Jon is the chair of MIT's Department of Economics, where he's also the Ford Professor of Economics. He was instrumental in creating both the Massachusetts Healthcare Reform and the Affordable Care Act. His latest book is Jumpstarting America, How Breakthrough Science Can Revive Economic Growth and the American Dream. Good to see you, Jon.
Good to be here.
So before we get to what's going to happen to Obamacare and Medicaid, et cetera, you had a wonderful experience. You went to the Nobel laureate ceremony. We're going to put a picture of you and your wife up there looking extremely swish at the event. And we're going to ask you about it. But before we do, I want to play a little sound of the Nobel laureate ceremony announcers giving your MIT colleagues, the ones who won the prizes in economics, their awards. Here it is.
Now, please step forward and accept the prize from His Majesty the King.
And first laureate to do so is Daron Ajamol. Also, Simon Johnson is affiliated. Simon, who, when he doesn't do research, is a great football fan. And of course, Sheffield Wednesday is his team, just as his father's, I understand.
So,
Yo,
Jon,
wait, forget that. You look at put the photograph back up.
The beautiful banquet table
oh my
behind
God.
it.
He's
I know.
in tails in your. Is it your wife's birthday today? By the way, I heard
it is in fact my wife's birthday.
Happy birthday to her. The two of you look like. I mean, it's
the king and queen yourselves.
Really,
you really do. I mean,
it's a beautiful
and the table
photograph
behind you. I mean, so give us, what was it like?
Well, first I have to tell you the story of this picture, which is hilarious. So the banquet's over. We're leaving. I'm like, gee, we should get a picture. I turn around, ask the nearest person to take our picture. Turns out she's the director of the entire Nobel Foundation. And she's like, sure, I'll take your picture. I'm like, oh my God, sorry to bother you. She was great, super nice. It was such a spectacular event. First of all, each Nobel laureate gets to invite 14 people. So my wife and I were beyond honored that Simon Johnson, my good friend, included Andrea and I as part of his entourage of 14 people. You stay at the Grand Hotel in Stockholm with all the Nobel Prize winners and their entourages. So it's kind of like Nobel camp.
Oh.
There's the Nobel office. There's free, hot and cold running Nobel chocolates. I'll give you guys Nobel chocolates at some point if you want them. And you get there, and then you go to all these incredible events. From going to embassies to Simon so kindly got us a private tour of the Nobel Museum.
Oh my gosh!
And of course, and then the main event, of course, is the Nobel ceremony and the banquet. Now, to set the stage, the Nobel Prizes are a really big deal in Sweden. They're just like our Academy Awards. Okay, we get in the cab, and the cab driver's like, "Oh, the Economics Award that was won by Daron and Simon."
Oh my God!
Just like someone say, "Oh, she got the Best Actress Award for her work in this movie." It's literally, it's their Academy Awards. People watch the banquet on television. We one day went on a tour of a little town nearby and was like, oh my God, you were there. Can I see pictures? It really is a big deal. So you go to this banquet, this giant hall. The rule is once the king sits down, you can't get up. So the king comes in at 7 and sits down, and you cannot stand again till 11.
Oh
so
my
the
God!
Are packed at 6:45. And packed again at 11. But you basically sit there. It's 1,300 people. You saw behind Andrea and I in that picture. There's a 88-person head table where the king and the queen, all the Nobel laureates and dignitaries, the guy who runs Volvo, etc., sit. And then there's a bunch of other guests thing. There's 200 servers with a director. And they're so well synchronized that when they bring the dessert down, it has like sparklers in it. And they walk along and they're walking towards the king. And at the exact same spot, for each of the 200 servers, the sparklers go out. Like they've got it so well synchronized. It's unbelievable. It was just a completely unique experience. People were very nice, and then just to be around all these fascinating Nobel Prize winners who are just regular people, and just smarter.
So what was
and their entourages was just wonderful.
By the way, when he says smarter, that you helped us get your two colleagues on the show. They were wonderful.
Yes.
Simon was your co-author on the book we mention all the time, Jumpstarting America, which is how we met him.
So do tell us, what is haute cuisine in Stockholm? What do they serve for dinner?
The dinner was, so what they do is it's only 3 courses over the 4 hours, which was a little surprising. You have a wonderful salad, I don't remember what it was, a delicious chicken and acorn squash sort of dinner. And then the dessert is the most important part, which is every year there's massive competition for who will do the dessert. It's very famous. This was this incredibly thinly sliced apple. So like they literally sliced each apple like there are thousands of these small, like feathers on a bird's head, slice of apple of this ice cream. It was incredible. And then in between each course, they have a performance. So there's a singer named Lala, who some of your listeners might know. She actually has performed in the U.S. She's the biggest performer. She's the hottest artist in Sweden right now. She comes and does songs and do plays in between every course. And it really is the ultimate pomp and circumstance. I will never be anything. I've never been anything as fancy before, and never will be anything as fancy again.
Okay, I just have a couple more questions. It's wintertime, so not much light in Stockholm?
So Stockholm, the sun rises around 9 and sets around 2:30.
Wow.
Or 3. Now, which is not that much earlier than Boston. I mean, sun was setting about 4 or 4:30 in Boston.
Well, that's a good point, yeah.
The difference is it gets, I guess maybe, I don't know, the curvature Earth or whatever. I'm not as smart as a Nobel Prize winner. But it gets super dark super quick. So by like 3:30, it is pitch black.
And what's Stockholm, and what is everybody out in the streets nonetheless? I mean, what's
People
Stockholm
on the
like?
streets, so, it's all lit up. The Scandinavians have this saying, there's no bad weather, only bad clothes. So everybody is dressed warmly out in the street, beautiful lights, holiday markets. I mean, the advantage of it being dark all the time is the lights, the light shows are incredible. My wife actually noticed an interesting thing, which is the houses do not have the garish displays of Christmas lights like we do, but every single house has beautiful candles on inside of it. Every single house has some nice sort of subtle light displays inside the house. And it's just, it's a beautiful, beautiful city, but it's dark and cold. It's not.
Did they ask
it's
you?
Not the time one would choose to go to Stockholm.
Did they ask you about our president?
It is such a source of embarrassment.
Yeah.
That it's almost like they don't ask because they know I'll be embarrassed.
Yeah.
It's almost like out of kindness, they don't bring it up because they know it's so embarrassing that it's almost out of kindness they don't bring it up.
Okay, before you go, I'm sorry, I don't want to, it's not quite bring this down, but I want to be real here. Okay, I would have been in the men's room with you at 6:45. But but I want to be honest here. At about 9:20,
you would have burst it.
I would have probably have to go back. And if King
Jim,
Olaf or whatever is up there and he's got another hour and a half, what do I do in that circumstance, Jon Gruber?
Well, first of all, you don't drink at dinner.
Okay,
yeah,
I don't. That's right.
You prepare. You go to the bathroom and you don't drink at dinner, and you just prepare. If you're sitting on the edges, you can sort of sneak off. The king doesn't have like scouts that'll shoot you down or something if you sneak off. So Jim, what you do is you sit on the edge and you kind of sneak off. But the truth is, it wasn't as hard as you think. You're fascinated by all the goings on around you.
That's great.
You're not drinking that much, and then you don't want to upset the king.
Well, the two of you did look beautiful, I should say, which is probably the most important thing to us.
Yeah, what a great experience, right? One for the ages.
The thing is, Marjorie, my wife and I are so blessed to get to travel, and as we come and talk about the depressing era we're entering. Traveling is so broadening and so eye-opening in terms of the value of different cultures and different experiences. We had a wonderful experience. My son got married in September to a woman from Brazil.
Congratulations.
Thank you so much. And we had about 10 people from Brazil stay with us for a week. And to have them in the house and hear their laughter and hear their songs and hear their culture, you can't do that and not appreciate the larger world we live in and appreciate the role that immigrants play in our society in America. And I think just getting exposed to that would be so eye-opening for people.
By the way, not dissimilar from what Rick Steves tells us every month about how meeting the people and the culture, being exposed to the culture and people who live different lives from you is what travel is all about. And he said it beautifully, and so did you. We're talking to Jon Gruber, so we'll have an abbreviated lesson plan
Yeah,
here
we
today,
will.
but we'll do it nevertheless.
But you are credited with being an author of Obamacare, and I had a kid who was on Obamacare for about a year, and it was quite inexpensive. But there's fears in the Trump administration that there will be big changes.
Yeah, I mean, I think there are fears. I think what I really want to emphasize today, though, is, the line I said to my daughter the other day is, it's okay to feel sad. It's not okay to feel hopeless.
Yeah.
Because we're not hopeless. And there are things we can all do. It's being sad, you can be sad, but inaction is not an answer, is not an option. And there's two ways that I think people can take action that's useful in this. And one is negative, which is really highlighting the real world consequences for everyday people from the changes that this administration will make. And since it's my area of focus, let's talk about healthcare. And let's talk about two of those. The first is the Affordable Care Act. President Biden made a very important addition to the Affordable Care Act. If you remember, people can either get health insurance for free through the Medicaid program if they're very low income, or if they're middle class, they can buy insurance on the exchanges, what was originally the Mass Connector. And the government will subsidize that purchase to make it more affordable. What President Biden did was pass a law that said no American who buys insurance on the exchange should have to pay more than 8% of their income for that insurance. That was an incredibly strong principle he put in place. That was stronger than the Affordable Care Act. The Affordable Care Act originally said Americans only below about 3 times the poverty line, which is about median income in Massachusetts, would have their health insurance costs capped. Other people, it would go above that. Biden said, no, everyone should have them capped. It should be at 8%. That is a law that expires at the end of this year, the end of 2025. Trump is very unlikely to renew that, partly because he's desperate for funds to finance his next tax cut. That would, and if he doesn't renew that, that will save him about $300 billion over a decade, which he can put towards tax cuts for the wealthy. Let's be clear that there are millions of people in America, millions, who when the clock strikes 12:01 on January 1st, 2026, will either be without insurance or will be paying thousands of dollars more for insurance. We need every one of those stories to be public. We need every one of those people to be talking about how they either lost insurance or had to pay thousands of dollars more because of the specific action of the Trump administration.
And by the way, if they lose,
that's my point. We can be depressed that he's doing it, but we also have to highlight the real world consequences of that.
Well, I want to talk about, just for a second, correct me if I'm wrong, please, Jon Gruber, is the real world consequences when you can't afford the thousands extra is you either don't get medical care or you go to emergency rooms. And my understanding is in places like Massachusetts, some of those costs, that the additional costs in emergency rooms when people don't have insurance, are borne by all the rest of us who do have insurance. Is that not true?
Jim, that is absolutely right, and a point I make all the time, and let's be honest, political messaging-wise, incredibly irrelevant. Because the honest truth is that basically it's too subtle. Yeah. The bottom line is, let's focus on, this is what Trump is very good at as a great communicator. Let's focus on these people are suffering these costs directly. Mm-hmm. And let's focus on that. Let's talk about another
Before
example.
you move on from this, though,
Yeah.
I do the news for a living. I'm really embarrassed to say I didn't even know about this 8% cap. Maybe I knew it when it happened, but talk about something under the radar.
Well, because no administration was worse at messaging than Joe Biden. That was just true.
Why didn't we hear about this during the campaign?
Back to that. We'll come back to that as my second lesson, Marjorie. Okay. But let's focus on one other example here, which is, I hate to say it because I worked in the ACA, but probably more important, okay, which is Medicaid.
Yeah.
Let's remember, when I teach my undergraduates, I say, if I meet you in the street in 5 years, there's only one thing I'm going to hold you responsible for, which is knowing the difference between Medicare and Medicaid. Medicare, remember, is universal coverage for the elderly.
Right.
Medicaid is coverage for the poor, which often includes the poor elderly, which makes it confusing.
When you run out of money in the nursing home.
So Medicare is a third rail issue. No one wants to touch that. You remember famously in 2009, the older woman with the sign, "Keep the government's hands off my Medicare."
Yep.
Which is government-provided single payer. No one's touching that. Medicaid, the Republicans have been convinced, since Newt Gingrich caused the government shutdown over this in 1994, they're convinced they can cut this politically. They're convinced they can get away with limiting Medicaid politically. Indeed, part of the reason Trump was unable to repeal the Affordable Care Act is he didn't just try to repeal it. he also tried to cut Medicaid by 25% at the same time. And here's why I think they can get away with it. Because who is the modal Medicaid recipient? It's an undeserving, and I'm using air quotes for those who aren't on YouTube watching, it's this undeserving single mother who, it's back to Ronald Reagan's welfare queen, okay? And it's basically, they think they can get away with saying, well, those people, they're not working, they don't deserve insurance anyway. Here's why they're wrong. 3/4 of Medicaid spending is on elderly people, mostly in nursing homes, okay? The modal payer for nursing homes in America is Medicaid. The payer for many Americans for the home care they get is Medicaid. Okay, so when you cut Medicaid, I don't think those people are undeserving. I don't think you do either. But none of us think our mothers are undeserving. Okay, that's who you're affecting. You are kicking people out of nursing homes. You are lowering the quality in nursing homes. That's a direct effect that we need to highlight. If you cut Medicaid, this is what's happening. And this is exactly the kind of, it's negative, but it's the kind of messaging that we need to be doing to help understand the real world consequences of these actions. And I think it's a kind of, and I think it's the inability of Democrats to do that messaging in the past, which makes Republicans think they can get away with cutting it.
I assume, so that's putting a human face on the consequences of Trumpian behavior. Part of your pitch, from what I understand, is also that we have to do a far better job at messaging around the positive things that are done in exactly the same way, the human impacts of policy that flies under the radar. Is that not where you're going?
That's exactly. So I have my first time a negative message. My positive message is we now have 4 years, or at least 2 years, to get our act together in terms of how to message the gains to people from the positive things that were done. The Biden presidency was an unbelievably successful presidency for policy wonks. Okay? He did so many things that economic policy wonks think were the things the Democrats need to pivot to, from the largest investment in the climate in our nation's history, to investing in building our nation's semiconductor industry, to regulating drug prices and keeping them lower for people. And he got no credit for it. Now, I think that basically there are two different issues here that Democrats, or those even Republicans who believe in good government, need to struggle with. The first is the simpler one, which is messaging, where I have no particular expertise or anything to say. I don't know why Biden was so bad at it, but there needs to be better tying directly the benefits of what we're doing to the people who are getting from them. But there's another piece, which has really been the focus of a lot of work that a lot of what Ezra Klein, the wonderful economic columnist in the New York Times, has been writing about for years, which is under his label of what he calls supply side progressivism, which is it's not enough to have good plans, you have to implement them. Okay? The Inflation Reduction Act, one of its major accomplishments, was funding a huge network of EV chargers all around the country, of which almost none exist. Okay? We have the CHIPS Act put massive money into trying to attract semiconductor plants to America, none of which have really even been started to be built. Okay? What is going on? Why does it cost twice as much to build a mile of subway in New York City as it does in Paris? Okay? What are the barriers to actually getting things done, to not just having a good idea, but actually translating that good idea into action? And this is where the Democrats need to, this is what Ezra's point, he's going to have a book coming out on this, on supply side progressivism,
Yes.
he calls it. We need to look in the eye and say, what are we doing that's getting in the way of actually accomplishing the goals we want to accomplish?
Well, overregulation is what he says. I've listened to his podcast about this. He says he can't. We just talked about this with the Harvard Square. Not being able to fix this building. That Democrats are so big on crossing every T and fighting over everything, and that they don't accomplish anything in the cities that people need. The classic example here is housing. We can't even get rent control.
Yeah, but can I just say, just 30-second digression?
What?
All the places that had to pass on, the wonderful Historical Commission in Boston,
Yep.
all the other OKs that Gerald Chan needed to develop that and do what he wanted to do with the theater we talked about were given.
He talked about the city council.
The
being
council.
slow.
Yeah, but that's not regulatory
Okay.
stuff.
Well, maybe it's the politics.
In any case, let's get back to
I like what Jim pointed out, because here's the thing. Here's the tough part about Ezra's position, which is each of the barriers you look at kind of makes sense in isolation. So the problem is we might say it's over-regulation, but the point is when you go in and say which regulation is over-regulation, well, each one you look at, you're like, well, I can sort of see the argument for that one. Let's get a different one. And you go through, and that's really the challenge is how do we set up institutions that can look holistically at the full set of barriers. And the problem is each individual group is in charge of the barriers they put in place. So here's an example of housing. Okay. In Chicago, they build housing. In Boston, they don't. One reason is the city of Chicago is the size of Boston plus its 32 closest suburbs. So when they need more housing in Chicago, they don't have to deal with one city fighting each city saying, I want to protect my little area. It's one big city.
Yeah.
They build housing. So the problem is we have we have a historical commission, we have a city council, we have all these different groups, which each have well-meaning goals. I don't want to diss these different groups, but we need to figure out how to set up an overarching structure which can make the hard decisions of, okay, this set of things has to be put aside in this case, and this set of things in another case, because we've got to get this stuff done faster. And I'm talking about it glibly at a high level because I don't have the answers. But if we want to get things done, if we being big G government people want to get things done, we have to figure out a strategy to solve these barriers.
Okay, before you go, can we end where we began? Your two colleagues who you helped us get on the show were so down to earth and so real and so accessible for geniuses. I couldn't believe it. So once they went to Stockholm and came back to work, are they different people or no?
They are such nice people. First of all, Simon was our host there. I mean, Daron is a wonderful guy too, my colleague, just incredible. Simon was our host. Simon literally spent a bunch of his time in Stockholm, the moment of his life, trying to make sure we were having a good time. Saying like, oh, come along on this event, come along on this event. It was really, it's just amazing being in a place like MIT with people as smart as this. And they're just nice, down-to-earth people. And the Nobel Prize has not changed that. We are having, we now have 2 straight weeks of seminars at MIT every single day as we look at candidates we want to hire for next year. And Daron's been in every single one. He's the most active participant.
I know, you told us.
And we're just blessed to have these wonderful guys as colleagues.
I have one more question. When you win the Nobel Prize, what's the prize?
It's the prize. So what they get is a certain amount of money. I don't know the exact amount of money. And they get literally a giant award. They get a giant what's it called?
Silver ball, gold ball. Plaque.
They get a piece of gold, and I think a lifetime supply of Nobel chocolates, but I'm not entirely sure.
It's about $1 million.
I focused on the Nobel chocolates because the first person I knew well who won the Nobel Prize was Peter Diamond, a wonderful former colleague of mine at MIT, who came back from the Nobel Prize, and my wife wasn't home, and gave me the Nobel chocolate, and she got home about an hour later. I'd eaten the Nobel chocolate, and she's like, "What have you done?" I'm like, "I don't know. It gave me a piece of chocolate. I ate the chocolate." She's like, "You're not supposed to eat it."
Let me just say one thing, John. Jon Gruber, if you win this thing someday, Marjorie and I are going whether you invite us or not. Let me just be clear. Happy birthday to Andrea, by the way. Send her our best.
We're counting on you, John. We're counting on you. Thank you.
Jon Gruber, thanks so much for your time.
See you
Welcome
later.
home. Good to see you.
We have been speaking with Jon Gruber, Ford Professor of Economics and Chair of MIT's Department of Economics, fresh back from the Nobel Prize Award ceremony. He was instrumental in creating both the Massachusetts Healthcare Reform Act and the Affordable Care Act. After a quick break, a new boss has found herself in a bind, Jim, with an employee who's pushing Girl Scout cookies on her, despite the fact that she can't actually eat the Girl Scout cookies. Is she still obligated to buy a box to avoid being an a-hole? There's more details. We'll fill you in up next. But this is the basic question we're wrestling with. At Boston Public Radio 89.7, you want to call or text 877-301-8970. We are streaming at youtube.com/GBH News.
I'm Soraya Wintersmith, coming up on GBH's All Things Considered. As President Trump takes aim at federal DEI initiatives, Massachusetts officials are standing up for local DEI efforts. Plus, it's been more than a month since rebel forces drove Syria's regime from power. The continued fighting from rival factions threatens the country. Those stories and the rest of the day's news, starting at 4 on GBH 89.7.
Our programs are made possible thanks to you. And Celebrity Series of Boston, presenting Counterpoint, a collaboration between pianist Conrad Tao and tap dancer Caleb Teicher, live at Boston Arts Academy on February 7th and 8th. Tickets at celebrityseries.org. And Boston Medical Center, committed to delivering medical excellence that empowers all patients. Learn more about how BMC's team of experts is rewriting healthcare for cancer, sickle cell, and beyond at bmc.org.
Welcome back to Boston Public Radio. Marjorie Egan and Jim Browder, streaming at youtube.com/GBH News. Live at the library tomorrow with live music. Former federal judge Nancy Gertner. She's got a full plate. Chefs, speaking of plate, chefs Irene Lee and Tracy Chang. Tracy's from Pagu. Irene is from Made Dumplings. And on Monday, Ask the Mayor. Mayor Wu joins us on Zoom at noon. Once again, time for Marjorie's favorite weekly segment. That would be Am I the A-Hole? This week, a woman is a new manager at her office, trying to figure out her team, make a good impression. Things get off to a rocky start when one of her team members comes to her to ask if she'd like to buy a box of Girl Scout cookies from their kids' fundraiser. This manager has celiac disease, so she can't eat the cookies, and she tells the colleague, sorry, but no. They have a back and forth about how she could give the box away if she can't eat it. By the way, it's like $6. But ultimately, she decides not to buy the cookies. Later on, she gets word this team member has been talking behind her back, Marjorie, using words like stubborn and stingy. The number is 877-301-8970. Call or text. Should the new manager have bitten the bullet and bought a box of cookies? As I say, like $6. Does saying no, even if you have a food allergy, make her an a-hole? Or is the a-hole this pushy office colleague who makes us think when people don't want to buy her kids cookies? Or is this just, and this is one of our colleagues did this as a tribute to Henry Santoro, is this just how the cookie crumbles? Thank you, Henry. 877-301-8970. Who is the a-hole? The boss who, because she has celiac disease, refuses to buy one damn box of cookies? Or, I mean, really? Or is the a-hole the pushy parent? And by the way, my kids were in the Girl Scouts. They were in something where I came to work one day and did the same thing, which is really obnoxious. That's right. I'll tell you what the appropriate thing to do is in a minute. Who is the a-hole? The pushy employee who is selling the cookies and then badmouths the non-purchaser, her boss, or the boss who, because of her celiac disease, allegedly, I think she's just a cheapskate, decides not to buy the cookies. 877-301-8970. Every single person who's a parent listening to the show, or actually, forget a parent, a worker has been in this dilemma, either selling their kids cookies or, so to speak, or being in a position where a coworker asks you to buy these things, which most of us don't, other than Thin Mints. Do you really want one of these? Don't we have Girl Scout cookies in the office somewhere we're supposed to be eating in this segment? Yeah. Well, they're not helping us in your room. Bring them in here, will you please?
So you once confessed, it was very embarrassing.
Oh, don't do this. What did I confess?
That when you were a kid,
what?
You went trick-or-treating for UNICEF. But you also expected to get candy. You wanted money and candy.
Yeah.
So you were like this lady with the cookies.
No, first of all, you didn't tell the real stories. I kept the UNICEF money. And
kept the
I did.
UNICEF
It was
money.
$6. And like 50 years later, on my television show on NECN, I gave your friend, who was the spokesperson for the Girl Scouts or whatever the hell, UNICEF regionally.
That's right.
I gave her a $100 check.
Yep, and you blew it up, so it was like a big picture.
Okay,
that was like
so here's my position on this. Thank
so
you.
everybody could
Thank
see
you,
the
Jamie.
check
Jamie,
when Jim was paying them back.
Peanut butter sandwich. By the way, nobody wants the peanut butter sandwich.
I
What
don't
are these?
like the Thin Mints either.
Thin. You don't like Thin Mints? What is wrong with you? Okay, so here's my position.
I don't like mints.
You know what I hate? I hate when you say they're both a-holes, but I'm sort of going to say this. Here's the deal. In terms of the boss who has celiac disease, get over it. And I don't mean get over the celiac disease.
Well,
buy the damn cookies.
What
And by the way, you either get wait.
disease got to do with anything
I don't know
really?
what- I don't care.
They're trying to raise money for
Okay,
the Girl
exactly.
Scouts.
So you do one of two things. You buy the cookies. That's the definite thing.
Mhm.
You throw them in the garbage if you don't want to give them away. Or you say, keep the cookies. Here's the $6. So she is clearly an a-hole. Having said that, my attitude is, and I did this when I was a parent selling something for my kids. It was sort of like a Girl Scout thing. It is one thing to put a piece of paper on a table and send out an email and say, please sign up if you'd like to buy, let's say, Girl Scout cookies. Because that's not invasive. It's another thing to walk up to a coworker and say, the only way my kid can go with the band to Florida because
Is if you give her $50.
as if you buy like 10 boxes. So I would say they both are in this case. But if I had to pick one, I would say it's the boss. The fact that you cannot part with $6 because you
here's the
allegedly
deal.
have a...
She is a new boss.
Yeah.
She is a brand new boss, presumably making a little bit more money than the people that are working underneath her. She just started 4 months before this incident. I think it's not a good way to win friends and influence people in the office when they ask you to buy a lousy box of Girl Scout cookies and you start telling them about that you have celiac disease. Not that celiac disease isn't a problem. It absolutely
of
is.
course it is.
But you give the cookies to somebody else,
Or throw them out, or
you
don't
throw
take them.
out.
Just
Yeah,
give the
don't
$6.
take 'em.
Can you have
You
a
know
cat?
what
This is you see this thing right here?
Yeah.
This is what is this
Thin
thing
mint,
called?
thin
No,
mint.
it's not. It's a peanut butter patty, which if you watch it, I'm about to eat, right?
I'll try the peanut butter patty.
Peanut butter.
Is it good?
Oh, that's pretty good. It's very good.
Okay,
There
she
you go,
should have brought the peanut butter
There you go.
patties. Okay, thank you very much.
You're very welcome.
Okay, so and I think that's
Shouldn't
the problem.
chew into the microphone.
We had to buy when my kids were little. We had to get the wrapping paper for
Were your kids in the
Christmas.
Girl
and
Scouts? Your two
they were not in the
daughters?
Girl Scouts. No.
So, what's your position on this? You're obviously avoiding taking a position.
Oh, the manager just really
A-hole.
goofed. I mean, nobody likes her now, and it's going to be horrible for her to work there, and everybody is giving her a hard time. People do this where you have to go hit up your coworkers when your kids have to buy wrapping paper. Or, you know what the other is? The other one is people that run very slowly, but they want to run for charity in the Boston Marathon. They have to raise it's a lot of money. I think it's like $5 grand or maybe 10 grand or something like that. They're really hitting you up because it takes a long way to get to $10,000.
Here's my favorite. We have a lot of texts and things. We'll get to your calls and say,
Yep.
Ruth's watching on YouTube says, Jim, you're right. Buy the damn cookies. And that is it. Buy the damn cookies and then decide what you want to do with them, including not even take them. Say sell them a second time to somebody else and you make another $6. These are good. These little, what are these things called?
These are the peanut
butter patty, yeah.
Peanut butter patties.
Open the Thin Mints in a second.
Let's go. You're certainly making a lot of noise chewing that cookie.
Sorry. I'm real sorry.
Pam in the car. Thank you for calling.
Hi, Jim and Marjorie.
Hey.
Nice to chat.
Hi.
What do you think?
I disagree, Jim. I think it is the mother who put the manager in an very awkward position.
Yeah.
And I think so many of these parents want their child to win the award for selling the most cookies that they kind of lose perspective and kind of force their coworkers into doing things they wouldn't want to purchase.
Well, how about my compromise where instead of going up to a coworker and embarrassing them if they don't do it, you just put a sheet of paper down and say, sign up if you want the cookies, huh?
Totally agree.
Okay.
Totally agree. That's what she should have done. And then if the manager wanted to suggest that was fine. But then for her to go around and talk badly about the manager, that's not good.
Pam, that was an excellent, well thought out
We
call.
didn't tell
Thank
the second
you.
part of the story,
What
Jim.
is the second part?
That they made a big show, her coworkers, of leaving a plate of cookies in the break room. What are you laughing at?
Read the top text. I'm sorry. Read Pam in Maine.
There's a quota for Girl Scouts to sell. I got very fat from my child's quota. I had to buy them all. Yeah, well, that's what
That's
happens.
a good one, Pam.
You know,
Thank
if you have to sell a certain amount of wrapping paper.
Yeah.
I mean, for years, I had wrapping paper coming out the windows. I had so
Yeah.
much wrapping paper because I hated running around asking people to buy the wrapping paper. It was beautiful wrapping paper. It was very expensive.
Oh, that's nice.
I ended up having to buy it all myself. But the second part of the story is at one point, after she refused to buy the Girl Scout cookies and everybody in the office was talking about her coworkers left this plate of cookies in the break room, telling everybody to help themselves and saying to her, this Girl Scout cookie is gluten-free, so feel free to eat some. So instead of eating some, she said the manager said she wanted to keep the peace. She said thank you, but she didn't eat any because I'm pretty strict about cross-contamination with gluten. I worry that I made things worse by not eating them, which she probably
She did, obviously, yeah.
But at the same time, I don't think I'm obliged to support his cause. So anyway,
What's the man? What's the man?
I don't.
Why don't you want Thin Mints?
I don't like mints.
These are actually quite good too.
Okay.
They're not as good as the peanut butter patties, though. By the way.
Linda from Warwick says, buy one box and donate to the local food pantry.
Exactly.
And an anonymous texter is indeed saying there's a gluten-free Girl Scout cookie, and they apparently had the gluten-free Girl Scout cookies for the manager, but she said, forget about that. I don't want to have any cross-contamination problems.
Can I ask you a question before
What?
I can do? What is the difference between a peanut butter patty and a peanut butter sandwich? I'm holding a peanut butter sandwich, Marjorie, at the moment. What is the difference?
John says one is chocolate covered, and one is
okay,
not.
Well, fine. Thank you. All right.
Carol in the car. What do you think, Carol?
These are pretty good.
Well, first of all, I'm a non-recovering Catholic. I have a son who is that's for you, Marjorie.
Yep, thank you.
And you're welcome. My son every year asks me to buy a terrible fish meal for I don't know how much, $12 or something.
Mm-hmm.
Every year I have to do it. A, I don't like fish. B, I don't like giving $12 to the Catholic Church. Okay.
Yeah. Well, I can understand that, Carol.
That's a good one, Carol. So what do you do? How do you deal with it?
Wait a minute. Is this from his school?
No, from the Knights of Columbus, whoever the heck they used to be.
Oh, the Knights of Columbus. They wear the outfits.
So what do you
and
do?
parade around.
It's your kid. What do you do?
What do? I suck it up and pay the lousy $12 and bless myself and pinch my nose and say, oh, dear God.
That was a hell of a call there, Carol.
Yeah.
We got it. Thank you, Carol.
That's
Thank
a good
you.
one. Thank you very much.
877-301-8970 is the number. By the way,
Jeff
here's
in
a clip.
Andover has a different take.
What is it?
He says the cookie pusher is the a-hole. The Girl Scout should be selling the cookies herself, not the parents.
Well, the kid can't come to the workplace and sell. By the way, that is you are dead wrong. That person, that is total extortion. If you bring your kid to work, I've had that experience. I didn't bring my kid. A coworker brought my kid. I can't remember where I was working at the time.
You can't deny the kid.
If they bring the kid over to your
That's right.
desk, you are totally screwed.
Oh, yeah.
That is really unfair.
Well, you always
know what happens? The kid starts crying. Well, you don't bother. Can you buy my cookies? Now, here is a clip from a 2015 skit where Girl Scouts try to sell Jimmy Kimmel Girl Scout cookies. This is right in the middle of a show. Here it is.
Hi, can I help you?
Hi, would you like to buy some Girl Scout cookies?
Oh, I'd love to, but I'm in the middle of the show right now.
Please.
I don't have any cash on me.
Oh.
Yeah.
So you don't have any money. You have a TV show and you don't have any money. Fire.
I didn't say I don't have any money. I don't carry a wallet in my suit. Can we discuss this after?
I get it.
Yeah.
You're
okay.
a big shot.
No.
Hey, everyone, look at the big shot. He's too busy to buy cookies.
That is an exaggerated version of exactly what happens to you when you don't buy the cookies. 877-301-8970.
Let's go to Ken in Rosendale. Hi, Ken.
Hello, Ken.
Hello, good afternoon, actually.
Hi.
Anyway, yeah, I always used to go bring the stuff in, but, some people wouldn't buy it. So what I do is if they approach me later with their kids' candy and all that, I say, well, go tit for tat. You wouldn't buy from me. I'm not going to buy from you.
Exactly.
There you go. That's right. Tit for tat.
I like it.
I like it.
Yeah, it's so silly. But, I mean, usually it's not that expensive, the candy, but, you get tired of buying it every other time when people bring something in.
Well, how often, wait, Ken, how often did you encounter this difficult situation here?
Well, the first of the year, when they first start school, usually around mid-September, early October, they start passing out the stuff saying, we want the kids to sell candy,
Well, I mean,
and then you have to try and convince people and all that.
I'm with you, though. It's sort of what do you call tit for tat kind of thing?
Tit for tat.
Ken, thank you very much for sharing your experience with us, too. 877-301-8970 is the number. I'm getting more upset with the boss, by the way.
Well, Whitney in Duxbury is defending her. She says she, too, has celiac disease, and why on earth would I buy a box of cookies I can't eat? The cookie lady is the a-hole for not being understanding and bad-mouthing her for a condition that she can't help.
Wait a second. The question is, why would you buy something you can't eat?
Because you give it away.
Because you're contributing to something nice for a child.
You just give like $7. That's what
Exactly.
they've gone up. They used to be $5 for a long time. Now
they're
they're
going
like
up to
$7.
$7.
Yeah, it's like the guys in the street that are selling the paper about the homeless.
Spare change.
Yeah, spare change. I mean, you don't really want the paper.
I read the paper.
You read the paper, okay?
I read the paper.
Usually, I say thanks.
You know what I did?
don't
I
read
want
the
to be
paper.
honest because
Yep.
you told me I have to be really honest on the show. I was at Whole Foods the other day, and the guy walked over to me and asked me if I wanted to buy spare change. You know what I said?
What?
I have celiac disease. I can't do it. And he said, I understand. I understand.
Jessica in the car. Thank you for calling.
I don't even know
Hi.
why I said that. I feel really
Hi.
bad about it. Hi. Hi, Jessica. What's your deal?
I have been a Girl Scout leader for 12 years.
Great.
I think 12. I have 3 daughters, and 2 of which are selling cookies this year.
Oh my gosh,
But
a family of cookie pushers, Jessica.
I'm actually the worst cookie mom out there. I'm like, I hate money. I hate selling things. I hate everything. But I would say that the mom in this case was the a-hole, because the number one thing I do is you don't pressure your sales. It's Girl Scouts teaches this everywhere. Quotas are also at the discretion of the cookie mom and not Girl Scouts of America or Girl Scouts of Eastern Mass. It is up to the troop to set a lot of this stuff. So if you have a pushy person, that's not Girl Scouts, that's that family. Like,
Jessica,
it's totally up the air, but they are $6 a box. There are gluten-free cookies, and you can donate. And there's even an option on the sheets and online to donate that go to food pantries. They go to troops overseas. At least in Eastern Massachusetts, which goes from Boston to all the way out to Brighton.
So, Jessica, what are the most common quotas? If they're $6 a bag or box, whatever they are, would you have to spend $200 or $300 or?
It's basically like no quota. They have incentives for the girls to earn.
Oh.
So the big exciting incentives don't start until you've sold 100 boxes. But that also
100 boxes. That's $600.
Yes, it is.
Wow.
And the troops, the girls only get 90 cents a box, $1.10 if they say they don't want their incentive, they get an extra 20 cents. But the troops only get a certain amount of the money, so it's really $100 that they're getting for their troop, not $600.
Okay, so if you do make
Boy, we're getting the inside poop from Jessica here.
Oh, that's right.
Love this.
I feel like I'm in the Secret Service or something like that. So if you sell $600 worth of Girl Scout cookies, you meet that quota. What do you get as the scout?
As a scout, I think $100. I think it's like $125 now. You can get a T-shirt. You get cookie credits that you can use towards the Girl Scout store or towards camp credits or all different Girl Scouts.
Jessica, since you have this level of expertise, do you prefer the Thin Mint or the peanut butter patty? Which is your preference?
I prefer the caramel delights actually.
Oh.
And then peanut butter patties. I don't really like the Thin Mints, and I actually really enjoy the peanut butter sandwich over and shortbreads.
Can I tell you,
really plain person.
in your honor, right now, I wasn't going to eat one. I'm going to have a peanut butter sandwich this minute.
So
Thank
Jessica,
you,
your house must be just floating in Girl Scout cookies. If you've got 3 daughters selling Girl Scout cookies, and they're talking like 100 boxes per kid, wow.
I actually have 28 cases in my car right now.
28 cases in your car right now. They might freeze, Jessica, in the cold weather.
I'm going to try this.
They get brought inside.
Oh, okay.
Hey, Jessica, you are fabulous. We are so glad you called. It's unbelievable. Now, let me tell you something.
Thank you, Jessica.
I was
What are you
not
eating over
going
there?
You want one of these?
No.
It's peanut butter. You love peanut butter.
I do like
It's a
peanut
peanut
butter.
butter. Here they are. Peanut butter sandwich. Now, I was not going to eat this in the microphone, but I just got a note from
got
one of our
to complain,
colleagues.
yes.
The Jared, who's going to join us, he thinks, in 5 minutes. He's very upset. He has that, what's that disease called that he's got?
Misophonia.
Misophonia. He says he is complaining. This is Jared. He's complaining about the misophonia. Wait a second. Hold on. While I'm
We have to find
broadcasting
out-
on the air, while I'm chewing the cookies.
We really have to find out who's selling these cookies and buy some.
Well,
Jim.
it's our coworkers had all the cookies in the
I know,
thing
but
there.
they're not Girl Scouts, so we have to find out what
You
the
think
deal
I'm
is.
buying any of these cookies? No. Carol,
Carlene, I don't know how to say this. Carlene and Dedham. I'm sorry.
Caroline. Hi,
Caroline.
Caroline. Dedham, how are you?
Yeah. Good. How are you?
Excellent.
First time, long time.
Oh, I love that.
Even your own station. I'm calling today because I'm a Girl Scout leader.
Oh.
I am the cookie coordinator for my troop.
No.
And my daughter has celiac disease.
Oh my goodness. God. It's like a threefer.
That's right. Trifecta.
Okay, go ahead.
So what do you think, Caroline?
The mom is the a-hole.
Yeah, because she wouldn't buy any.
No, the seller.
No, the mom.
The selling
seller.
mom.
I mean, as a troop leader and the cookie coordinator, Jessica took a lot of my thunder. The person was before me. We are low pressure. We go actually into Stop and Shops, and we have on Sundays, and we're there from 9 to 12, and we have our little booths, and the kids talk to people as they come in and talk about Girl Scouts and sell cookies that way. It's a very soft sell, at least for my troop. And even at work, I do sell them at work, but I make an announcement. I'm like, anyone want Girl Scout cookies? I got them. I have 20 boxes in the car right now.
20 boxes? Wait a minute. 20 boxes or 20 cartons?
Cases.
Yeah. Boy, they really
But wait a
load
second. Get
you
back
up.
to what you said a minute ago. You do it the right way. You make an announcement. That way, if people choose not to respond, they don't respond. And if they do, they do, right?
Caroline,
go ahead.
How many boxes are in each case?
12.
12. So you're the mathematician. What's 12 times 20?
240 boxes in a car.
You got a lot of selling to do, Caroline, right?
As the cookie coordinator, what I do is I pick up all. That's my title. I call myself the cookie queen
Yes.
during the season.
I think you are, Carlene. You sound like one.
And,
yeah.
and so what happens is when the kids put their orders in, I pick up the cookies, I deliver it to the girls, then the girls deliver it to whomever bought from them. That's why I have so many cookies in my car right now, because I have to deliver cookies tomorrow.
Okay. Do you have a favorite cookie?
I do. I'm a Thin Mint girl.
Thin Mint.
Thin Mints are really
I think
good.
isn't that the most popular, the Thin Mints?
I think it is.
It's a toss up right
Between
now.
what and what?
Is it's the Caramel Delights have been selling really, really well. It's the Thin Mints and the Caramel Delights for us are neck and neck.
Now, Carlene, before you go, I'm intrigued by your position. Let's assume you and I were to meet on the street and we shook hands, and I said, I'm Jim Browdy, I work at GBH. Would you say, I'm Carlene, I'm the cookie coordinator for my chapter? Is that how you'd introduce yourself?
Absolutely.
Absolutely. Well,
Hey, I saw a picture of
we
these
are thrilled
caramel-
you called, Carlene. Call us
caramel
again
delights.
soon. You were great.
These are very, I think people call them Samoas as well.
That's what that woman said was her
crisp
favorite.
Cookies with caramel, coconut,
Thanks, Carlene.
and chocolatey stripes.
Yeah.
There's a picture
I think
of
I've
it.
had that. Let me see the picture.
It's very
for a second.
good.
Well, it's not really helping the listeners. Can I see
No,
the
it's
picture
not.
for a
You
second?
can
How
take the
they
picture.
look.
Tom in Winchester, what do you think?
No, let me see the picture. Here it is. Okay. Oh.
Hi, Tom.
Oh, it's got
Hey,
stuff
I've been
drizzled.
listening. Hi there.
Hi.
I've been listening to radio since the mid '90s, and you guys ever since you came on GBH.
Oh, thank
Today is
you.
The first day I've ever called any program.
Oh my God.
Because this is the issue. This is the issue that really gets me going.
Okay.
So, all right. It's very clear to me that I am the a-hole.
And how's that?
And the reason is because I totally object to parents doing this on behalf of their kids. I think it's the worst form of helicopter parenting, and they're missing an opportunity for these kids to reach out, interact with adults, state the reason why that they should be supported, and I think it's a learning opportunity that is terribly missed. So what I have done in the past is I've said to those parents, have your kid reach out to me directly, and I'd be happy to support them. And when they have, I've asked them what's the largest cookie order they have so far, and I double it.
Wow.
And because I want that kid, and back in the days when kids would come into the office, look an adult in the eye, tell them what they're doing, the look that they give you when they're excited about what they get, show them your generosity, but not just to fill out a sheet on behalf of the parent.
Can I tell you, Tom, I was going to ridicule you for this being the first time you called, and I won't, because that was perfect. That was brilliant.
Okay.
Perfect. Call us again soon, Tom. That is exactly the right attitude.
He's provided a good excuse for everybody that doesn't want to buy the Girl Scout cookies.
Well,
I'd do it if you brought the kid in.
Well, he didn't say bring it. Have him call me. Have him reach out to me. Now, let me just say this to you.
Yes.
Were it not for the fact that one of our alleged friend and coworkers was complaining, I'm sure to high places, about me chewing a cookie in the air, I would have another peanut butter patty right now. But because I don't want to be complained about,
You want a peanut butter
I
patty?
will not.
No, thank you, because I will not eat in a microphone. But thank you for being so accommodating.
No, it's okay. I'm happy to.
We shouldn't eat the microphone. It's very annoying. I must admit, I've done it a couple of times.
No, we're on the radio and we had a cookie. What are we supposed to do?
Well, you didn't have to eat it.
You ever eaten on the air with?
Did you have one cookie or did you have like several?
It was the way you were eating it, Jim. It was really over the top.
Have you ever eaten on the air into a microphone?
I don't think so.
Okay, fine.
That's probably a lie. I'm sure I've tasted things, but we're supposed to do that.
Sometimes you can have things on a spoon. Like you can have discreet or like.
Are they bringing food tomorrow? Or are Irene and Tracy bringing?
They're bringing food.
We're eating on the air tomorrow
Okay,
too.
we're gonna eat it.
Just an
Dumplings.
elegant little slurp.
You better not listen
That's
to
all.
Mar either. Okay, so what's the? What would you? Who's the a-hole? Quickly, do you know?
Yeah. Okay. So in my day, I had to get on my bicycle as a little Cub Scout and
That's right.
ride
You were a
around the
Cub
neighborhood. I
Scout?
was, and you had to ride around the neighborhood and sell calendars to neighbors who didn't want to buy the calendars, but you had to convince them to do
Yeah.
it. So I had to do my own work. I didn't have parents
And you had
showing
to-
up in the workplace
You had
selling
to
things
watch
for me.
out for Uncle Buddy down the street.
You remember in
Yeah,
Michael
you did.
Kurt's The Choice?
Not just in homes either.
What was the first job that Donald Trump ever had? Do you remember what it was?
He delivered papers
And
in
how
his,
did he deliver
in
them?
his limousine.
His family's, it's totally true. Michael Kirk's The Choice. He's delivering papers in the neighborhood in his limousine. What are you doing on that show of yours?
So we are going to be looking at a film. Often when the Holocaust is talked about, I know we're switching gears a little bit here. When the Holocaust is talked about, one of the questions that's presented often is why didn't the Jews defend themselves? And so there is a new film that's airing on PBS next week that talks about, in fact, there was resistance, and there was a great deal of resistance, so it documents that.
What's it called?
It is called Resistance.
Oh, okay.
And why they fought back, or they fought back. And Cara Romero, an indigenous photographer who creates these fanciful, colorful, fabulous renditions and representations of modern indigenous dress.
Is this the
and
Dartmouth thing?
Culture at Dartmouth,
Oh, yeah.
yeah, exactly. And then we have Joshua Bernstein on talking from the New York Times, talking about why the craft industry, the beer craft industry, is kind of nosediving at this
tanking.
moment.
Yeah, that's too bad.
Not completely, but it's definitely taking a hit
And
because times have changed.
Who's responsible for giving it life about 40 plus years ago? Jimmy Carter. He
Oh, that's
made
right,
home
yeah.
brewing legal, and that led to the craft beer kind of experience. We'll be listening. Nice to see you.
All right,
Have a cookie
I'll
on your
leave
way
so
out.
you can eat.
Chomp away.
Yeah. Here's an upbeat text to end the show. Anybody who bothers coworkers to sell crap in the workplace is the a-hole.
Nicely put. Okay, we only have 50
Did you
seconds.
just on that one, Jim?
I did. It is sort of how I feel.
Okay. Thanks for listening to another edition of Boston Public Radio. You can
Mitch in New Bedford says, "How about a cash opt-out? I'll give you $1 to leave me alone." That's a good one.
Okay,
sorry, guys.
we're going to be back at the Boston Public Library
We are.
tomorrow with singer-songwriter Kat Wallace, Live Music Friday, GBH's Callie Crossley, retired federal judge Nancy Gertner, May Dumplings, Irene Lee, and Pagu's Tracy Chang. Jim's going to be eating some dumplings on the air tomorrow and
you, maybe,
annoying
too.
Jared. It's going to...
What's interesting? What's going on around town? We're talking all things arts and culture on The Culture Show, next on GBH 89.7.
Funding for our programs comes from you and the University of Massachusetts Amherst, ranked the #1 public university in New England by U.S. News & World Report. You can learn more about research, innovation, and economic impact for the Commonwealth at